Done.
Great.
We're good.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the May 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Landmark Preservation Commission, and I'll call this meeting to order. So first, I'd like to welcome, we have a new commissioner starting today, Larry Sykes. Welcome. Glad to have you here. So we're going to start with introductions to the commissioners, and Larry, just so you know, during this time, we'll run through, I'll ask you to introduce yourself when we're ready, and just state, your name, who you were nominated by, your profession, and we'll just make it quick and painless. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Wemple. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects. Next, we're just going in alphabetical order here. So we've got Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Hummel. I'm a landscape architect, and I was nominated by the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Thanks, Erin. Graham? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, I even clicked it, dang it. My name is Graham Johnson, a Preservation Project Manager, nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Thank you. Julie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Johnson. I am a Historic Preservation Project Manager, and I was nominated by the community at large.
And Gary?
Hello, I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Larry?
I'm Larry Sykes. I am an architect, and I was nominated by History Colorado.
Thank you. Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Wattenberg. I'm an architect nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
Great. All right, that's everybody today. So next we will, we have one meeting record on the agenda for approval. Just the agenda says that we have two records, but April 5th was approved at the last meeting. So April 19th is the only one for today. So for those of you who were present in that meeting, any comments? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the meeting record for April 19th, 2022.
Great, thank you, Graham. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Erin. All right, if there's no further discussion on the motion, I will call for the vote. And just a reminder, say aye if you are voting in favor, nay if you're voting opposed, and abstain if you need to abstain from voting. So, Erin.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Julie.
Hi.
Gary.
Aye.
Larry.
Abstain.
Erica. Oh, Erica's not here. Sorry, Anne.
Hi.
And Kelly, abstain. Larry and I were not present at that meeting, so that's why we're both abstaining. And let's see, but we still have 5 votes, so the motion passes. And the meeting record is approved. All right. So at the beginning of every Landmark Preservation Commission meeting, we reserve some time for public comment. This is for comments that aren't pertaining to any project on design review agenda today. So if you have any general preservation comments, please go ahead and let us know at this time. If you're joining by phone, please dial *9 on your keypad. That's going to let us know that you're raising your hand. And if you're joining via computer, please use the hand raise button. And this is how it'll work for public comment throughout the meeting. Jen, do you see any hands raised?
Don't see any hands raised.
And
No.
is anyone joining us by phone? Do I need to keep?
No.
Okay.
No, on my phone, I'll let you know if someone does.
Great. Thank you. Okay, if we have no public comments, we'll go ahead and move forward with the consent agenda. So commissioners, I believe you all received an email earlier. We had 2 projects on consent, but we do, I'm going to recommend we pull 532 Franklin off of consent today because we were missing some of the application materials. So would someone like to make a motion to postpone this project to the May 17th LPC meeting.
It's a continuation, actually.
Oh, gotcha. Continue. That makes sense.
I can do it.
Great.
Madam Chair, I move to continue application number 2021-TAXC-001 532 Franklin to the May 17th meeting.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll
Madam
second.
Chair,
Thank you, Graham. I think you got that one. All right, then I'm going to call for the vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Julie,
I,
Gary,
Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
and Kelly. Aye. All right, so the motion passes and that project will be continued to the May 17th meeting. Okay, so we do still have one other project at 1433 and 1435 Larimer Street. If anybody had a question for staff, let us know at this time.
Ellie, this is one I can abstain from the vote or I can recuse myself since we only have one, whatever's easier for the, I guess, the meeting process here.
Well, typically if you, that's interesting. Jen, what do you,
Yeah.
or Nate, do you have a preference on
Sorry, I know
that?
it's one agenda item and I got ahead of myself on the tax credit piece there.
No worries. So if you need to recuse yourself because of some sort of reason for recusal, that you can't make an impartial decision, or you're working on the project or working with the applicant or some other reason, then you can do so, and I'll just move you forward and backwards. It's super easy.
Perfect.
And
Then let's do that since
Okay.
we're involved in the project.
Perfect. We will see you on the other side. Just a
Thanks.
moment.
All right, sounds good.
Great.
There he
Thanks,
goes.
Graham. So Graham has recused himself from the review of this consent agenda item. All right. So were there any questions for staff? Anyone who wants to take this off of consent? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
I can make the motion.
Thank you, Anne.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of application number 2022-COA-190-1433-1435 Larimer Street.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll
second.
take that.
Ooh, I think Aaron beat you to it. Thank you, Aaron. All right. Then I'll call for the vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Graham. Oh, Graham's not here. Sorry. Julie. Gary,
Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
and Kelly. Aye. All right. So we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes. So this project is approved.
And I just moved Graham back.
Great, thank you. So I would just like to mention for the applicant, if the applicant of the Larimer Street project is on the line, that I really just wanted to make a friendly comment that I appreciate they actually highlighted which parts of the window assessment were applicable to the application. It made it very easy to review. And I know those reports can be quite lengthy. So I just wanted to say, really appreciate that. Made it much easier to review. So if you're joining us for one of the consent agenda items today, feel free to hop off. We're going to move forward with the rest of the agenda. Okay, so Jen, since we're just setting a public hearing and not having a public hearing, do we need to go over the process? Okay, just making sure. I wasn't planning on doing that. Okay, so we do have one project, 2022-LM demo -234 at 332 Vine Street, that we need to set a public hearing for because they're demolishing a front facade feature. So the recommendation is to set the hearing for June 7th. Could someone make a motion for that? unless there's any discussion to be had. All right, who's going to make the motion?
I'll do it. Madam Chair, I move that we set a public hearing for June 7th, 2022 for project 2022-LMDEMO-234 at 332 Vine.
Thank you, Erin. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Gary. All right, let's vote. Erin,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
Kelly, aye. All right, we have a unanimous vote, so the motion passes and the hearing is set for June 7th. So let's move on to the design review projects on the agenda today. Up on the screen, you'll see the process for design review. I'll go ahead and announce the project, and commissioners will let us know if they have to recuse themselves. Staff will then introduce the application and provide their recommendation, after which we'll invite the applicant to join us for their presentation. You have up to 10 minutes. The time is yours, after which we'll open it up for public comments. So the public comment period is 2 minutes per person, and just go ahead and use the hand raise button at the time that we ask for comment if you would like to provide a comment. After that, we'll move into deliberation and vote. So the first project on the design review agenda today is 2022-COA-185 at 3142 Champa Street. So Jesse.
All right. Let me switch over to the next slide. If it will let me. Jen, it is not allowing me to switch. Oh, there it goes. Okay. It's a little sleepy today, I guess. So this is 3142 Champa Street. Landmark staff received a report of alterations being made to this property in February of 2022. The landmark inspector went to the site and determined that the following violations had occurred to the property. Replacement of 7 windows on the front and sides of the house. Some of the new windows do not match the profile or design of the prior windows on the house. I would like to note that many of the windows that were on the house were vinyl, non-historic vinyl replacement windows. The next violation was replacement of the fish scale shingles in the gable face with a new round shingle profile that does not match the shingle profile that was existing on the house. There was also a diamond pattern on the side gables of the house, which can be seen in other photographs. Removal of a barge board, decorative brackets, coffered spandrel panel on the front facade, decorative dental trim and other wood details, and finally a new skylight on the rear slope. I would like to note that the skylight was approved in February, on February 28th through a landmark quick process. So that is no longer a part of the violations that are going to be reviewed by the commission today. So pictured here are additional photos of the violation on the house, the north, south, and east elevations. So on the back of the house, you can see that there was that skylight that has been approved by landmark staff already. The applicant is proposing to replicate and install the decorative shingle in the gable ends, the octagonal shingle on the west elevation, and the diamond patterns on the north and south elevations, the barge board and the decorative brackets, the coffered spandrel panel, as well as the dental trim and details. The applicant is requesting to alter the first floor window configuration to a pair of 1/1 double hung windows with a mullion and a segmental arch over top. So staff was able to find 2 photos of the house in its prior appearance. One photo was from the designation, shows the first floor windows being a single double hung window with 2 side lights. This was a vinyl window. Photos provided by the property owner do confirm that it was a vinyl window, and as well, several of the wood detail pieces were newer lumber that were marked. So you can see that in the application packet. The second photo was a 1970s Denver Post photo. The image appears to show a single 1/1 window with a segmental arch detail over the top. But I would like to note in this image, there's a fence picket that kind of blocks the view of that window fully. So it is not fully confirmed whether or not that was a single 1/1 with a segmental arch. So staff is recommending conditional approval of the application with the condition that the dimensions be added to, additional dimensions be added to section C drawing to ensure that it's a close match to the previous profile, and that a single 1/1 window with a segmental arch detail be installed at the first floor, citing guidelines 2.4 and 2.14 and 2.20. Staff feel that the applicant should use the historic photos and surrounding context to recreate the window configuration at the first floor. So pictured here are other Queen Anne structures nearby with single arched windows at the first floor and paired 1/1 windows at the second floor. I would like to note that there is a paired windows with a segmental arch in the photo on the far right that may support their proposal of 2 windows at the first floor. However, it is more common to see that one single large arched opening at the first floor in this district. But staff would be open if the applicant is able to find additional context to support that. So we defer to the commission on the final determination as to whether or not they feel it's appropriate to have a single 1/1 window with a segmental arch or paired windows with a segmental arch at the first floor, but do recommend that that condition for additional dimensions on the section C's detail be added.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Jesse. Are there any questions for staff? No. All right. Is the applicant present?
Yep, I just moved Scott over. Well, I'm trying to move him over. Scott, it might, there it goes.
Great.
Yep.
Scott, it looks like you've been moved over to a panelist, so you can unmute yourself when you're ready. Please start with your name and address for the record, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Sure. Hi, my name is Scott Vegas, and I live at 3142 Champa Street. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm a little confused because Jessica mentioned that if I could provide some examples of surrounding homes with the pair of double hung windows on the front downstairs, that might be a consideration for the staff. And I had sent 4 or 5 examples in a photo that were compared with the drawing that I provided. And I asked if she would forward those to you, and I'm not sure if you received them or not, but I was curious if those were there because I had, 4 of those, and there's only 2 here that show the configuration that they're requesting. So I feel pretty strongly about the double hung, the pair of double hung windows on the first floor. I think that there is a precedent for that in the neighborhood, and it's historically correct. I actually walked around the neighborhood and went up and down every street in the Curtis Park boundary and found all of the houses that did that. And I had sent her photos of them, and not all of them are the same configuration. Some are Italianate houses and different ones, but a lot of them had 3/3 and 2/2. And it seems like it is historically correct. And if you look at the photos that I sent to have her sent to you guys, you know, if you look at that drawing next to Keith Pryor's house, it's almost exactly the same. And then there's one underneath it that's almost exactly the same configuration. And then there's another one. And I'm just curious why those houses would be able to have that and I wouldn't, because the windows that were removed were vinyl, and based upon photos from 1970, a lot could have happened in the 90 years when the house was built and when that photo was taken. So, you know, I mean, just the fact that it could be, they could have been two individual double hung windows. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to do that. That's basically my, my plea. But I feel pretty strongly about it. I feel like it would be incredibly wasteful to rip those out now and have to replace them. And it took me a year to get those windows. And I can't imagine how much time it would take to get custom new ones with that new configuration.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Sure, thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant from commissioners? No. I did just want to let you know, since you had mentioned that you had sent some images, we did receive those. Jesse did forward those to us, and it was 3 photos next to the drawing elevation that you had provided in your application packet. So we do have those. It looks like 2 of the images were photos of side-by-side double hung windows, but they were in upper, like the 2nd story of homes, right? And then the other one was showed kind of the whole elevation, but it was a little cut off, so it's hard for me to personally see whether there were 2 windows side by side or not. I don't know if.
Oh wait, I'm not sure. I thought it was very clear to me that there were 2 windows in the downstairs and all of the ones that I provided as an example.
Oh, okay, maybe mine printed weird. Did
that
you
one
guys
is 2656
okay?
Curtis that's on screen right now was one of the examples that I had sent. Also.
Yes, yeah, I see that one too. Maybe mine printed funny.
I see them on my screen in the email of 4 images.
Oh, okay. I printed it. Maybe it just cut off when
it may have
printed.
cut off. It's a large email, large.
Yeah.
width.
I mean, regardless, you know, I mean, I was just curious why I wouldn't be able to do that when that is a historical, you know, precedent.
Sure, sure. And we'll talk about that in deliberation. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? No? Thank you for your time. All right. Is there anyone on the meeting who would like to provide public comment on this project? Please use the hand raise button at this time.
Interestingly, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
No?
Nope, guess not.
All right. Sounds good. Well, then we'll move in. Yeah, Jesse, did you have some recap?
I just wanted to quickly recap. I didn't include any of the photos in that email in my presentation because I didn't have addresses for them. So that is the reason why, but also this was a decision that we discussed as staff. And at the time we did not have these additional photos, which was why we made this recommendation. And that is also why at the end of my presentation, I'm leaving it up to the discretion of the commission as to whether or not there's enough detail here or evidence here to support the request for the paired windows at the first floor.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. All right.
I'm going to move, if you're going into deliberation, I'm going to move Scott over just so he's aware of what's happening.
Great, thank you. Good segue. So let's move into deliberation. You saw staff's assessment of the guidelines. What did everybody think? Gary.
Well, I'm looking pretty closely at that Getty's images photograph that was taken apparently in the 1970s. And one of the pickets in the picket fence happens to kind of line up where there would be a mullion if there had been a mullion between those 2 windows. But if you look at what does show through on either side of that picket, there seems to be a difference in the way the lower sash is portrayed in terms of light, dark. And if you blow it up a little bit, the differences seems that it could be even more than just a lighting situation. So, that's not a lot of evidence, but it's possible that this was a pair of double hung windows rather than a single window. It's just as possible as if it was a single window. So I think we have some discretion here to allow the pair of double windows, the pair of double hung windows, but let's talk about it more.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll jump in. I think the other piece that was compelling evidence to me, based on Gary's analysis of the photo, which I also agree with, was the fact that all of the detailing around the window and that the existing glazing was vinyl. The 2x material, the arch, all of those things read, pretty nicely from in the photos before they were removed. I think looking at the photo that is kind of current condition, bottom right corner of page 103 in the submitted drawings, you have a pretty nice, semi-flat masonry arch there. And I don't think that there's anything in the, other detailing that I saw that points to that, being one way or the other. And so I would agree with Gary. I think that we maybe don't have enough information to say one way or the other, but it wouldn't necessarily preclude us from being fully confident that that had been a single window in the past. So.
I agree. I mean, I just think that this photo is really difficult to discern the Getty Images folder, what was there in 1970, and without knowing, I think that the proportions of the two windows side by side seem to fit well with the context of the rest of the structure and the proportions on it, the windows above and the district. So I'm fine with the two windows in that opening as well. Anne.
I will say that looking at all of the images, I don't see any of them in which the window doesn't have an arched top to it. So I'm looking at the photographs that were required, and maybe I'm just looking at the wrong things, but they all seem to have, in this particular case, the windows aren't arched. It's two flat windows with the arch as part of the frame. And all of the other ones, there's actually a curve to the top of the window.
So Anne, are you saying, because he is proposing to put the curve back above the window. So are you saying that there's that you have a concern with how that's portrayed in his elevation?
Aren't the windows, isn't the head of the window flat?
The head of the window is flat, and then the elevation on the screen right now, you can see that he's proposing to put that wood arch back above it, along with the paneling kind of detail.
Correct, but if you look at all of the images, the actual glass is curved.
Of the previous windows and the other windows in the district.
In other words, in this case, the arch is provided by a curved section that's a piece of wood on top. Every place else, even the ones that, the images that he sent where they're doubles, there's a curve at the top of the glass. So it's not an add-on piece, it's actually a curved window. So, however, I have to say, I sort of agree with everybody. There's a lot of latitude in here, but I do think, by the way, it kind of misses something when it's a flat window and a curved piece, because I think part of the workmanship of the original style of these is that there really was curved glass. There was a sort of unusual configuration, and this is a more usual one, but I have to say, it's hard to say. So I just bring that up as a friendly comment, I guess.
No, that's a fair point. Definitely the other images that were shown in the district do have curved glass up there. I will say, if you zoom in on the Getty images, I think it looks like a flat, like a panel and not glass up in the curve. And it looks to me like that curve, it's hard to say because you can't see the edges of the opening, but it looks like it's similar to what he's proposing from what we can see there. So for what it's worth. Yeah, Jesse.
I was going to say there are two examples in the photos that he emailed to you that have a panel over the top, not on this page, but in the email that was forwarded on to the commission members.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, so it sounds like for the most part, it sounds like people are leaning towards finding it to be appropriate to have the 2 windows rather than one in the opening. Is that accurate? I see some nodding heads. Okay. So Jessie did have one other condition in her suggested motion, and that was to correct the add dimensions to section C. So we could, if people feel strongly, continue that. I'm a little less concerned considering it looks like they're just in the existing opening. So it's kind of the dimension is whatever the existing is. But
Kelly, I think that reusing that, built up spandrel panel keeps that consistent too. So I'd agree that I think being in the existing opening and using historic fabric makes me comfortable also with the applicant's intentions.
gotcha. I think your connection's a little poor, Graham, but I heard that it was a little broken up. But
as long as you got most of it,
yeah, I think we got it.
All right. I'm good with it. That's the bottom line. I agree with you.
Great. Well, it sounds like people are coming to consensus. So would someone like to try a motion?
Madam Chair, this is Julie. I can try. I move to conditionally approve application 2022-COA-185 for the replacement of windows and siding at 3142 Champa Street as per design guidelines 2.4, 2.14, 2.20, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following condition: that dimensions be added to section C drawing to ensure a close match to the previous profile.
Thank you, Julie. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Gary. All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call for the vote. Aaron.
Aye.
Graham. Julie.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Larry.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Kelly. Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes. So next project on design review today is 2022-COA-055 at 2400 West 33rd.
Okay, so this is 2400 West 33rd Avenue. It's located at the corner of West 33rd Avenue and Zuni Street in the Potter Highlands Historic District. The existing lot features a non-contributing gas station that was constructed around 1963. The applicant is requesting to demolish the non-contributing structure and to construct a new duplex structure. The applicant received a conditional approval from the commission on February 15th, 2022. The conditions for that application being that the porch columns be enlarged so that they were more proportional, that the porch columns be moved out to the edge of the porch roof, and that the porch railing be removed. The applicant has adjusted the plan set to meet those conditions and is now returning to the commission with phase 2 design details. So the proposed infill structure will be 34 feet deep by 48 feet wide. The duplex is designed in the Italianate form and features a raised foundation and a flat roof. The roof will be clad in white TPO. The building will be clad in general shale brick in the color Coliseum. The entry and the entry and back doors will be full light aluminum clad wood doors by Anderson. The proposed windows will be FiberX single hung casement and fixed windows by Anderson. The windows will be inset in the wall 3 3/8 inch or 3 inches 3 3/8 inch, excuse me. The house and the garage will feature a simple cylindrical wall sconce downlight as well. So pictured here are additional details of the proposed cornice and window inset. The building's cornice will feature 6 courses of angled general shale standard brick in the color Coliseum. At the top of the parapet wall will be, the top of the parapet wall will be clad in metal flashing in the color black 2132-10 by Benjamin Moore. Additional door and window schedule information and materials details can be found on pages 30 through 33 of the application packet if you guys need to look at those. So the proposed porch will feature a flat roof form with EPDM roofing with a metal cap flashing and metal fascia in the color black 2132-10 by Benjamin Moore. The porch will be supported by 8x8 steel columns with a steel C-channel column cap in the color black 2132-10 by Benjamin Moore. The porch soffit will be tongue and groove wood with a clear stain, and the porch floor will be a smooth finish concrete. The proposed garage will be clad in general shale brick in the color Coliseum. The flat roof will be clad in white TPO. The top of the parapet wall will be capped in metal flashing in the color black 2132-10 by Benjamin Moore. The garage windows will be fixed fiberglass windows by Anderson. The proposed garage service door will be a solid fiberglass door by Therma-Tru, model number Smooth Star PT-01. The garage doors will be flush panel steel doors by Thermacore, model number 5720. The site will feature a 5'6" high horizontal wood rear yard fence, and the front yard fence will be a 3 foot tall black metal fence. Staff feel that the applicant has cleanly addressed the commission's previous conditions for phase 1. Additionally, staff feel that the proposed materials are of high quality construction and are recommending approval of the application citing guidelines 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, 4.8, 5.8, 5.9, and 5.21, as well as the character defining features for the Potter Highlands Historic District. I did want to end this presentation with sheets 027 and 028 as requested by a commission member for further discussion. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I have these 2 slides included.
Thank you, Jessie. Are there any questions for staff? I just have one question, pretty minor, and actually it's on the sheet. So the rear fence is proposed as a horizontal wood, and I know what we typically see vertical, and I just wanted you to refresh my memory. Have we approved horizontal wood fences in the past?
We have. It's usually not on corner lots, but I was I made the determination that since this is a new infill property and it wouldn't be, it's a minor detail, that it wouldn't be a big deal. It's also reversible. It can be removed and changed or altered in the future. If the commission does have concerns about it, they can certainly make that a condition.
Great, thanks. Any other questions for staff? All right, let's talk with the applicant. Is the applicant present? Great. All right, great. You've already unmuted yourself, so go ahead if you could start with your name and address for the record. You have up to 10 minutes.
Sounds great, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Dale. I'm the architect for the project of 24 100 West 33rd Avenue. Our address is 1255 West Virginia Avenue. I believe we've got some slides loaded up here. Hopefully, if we can go to those.
Yeah, that's me. Hold on.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank
No
you for reminding me. I'm going to stop
Ju-
share and then I'm going to reshare. So just a sec.
Sure.
And she's stopped the time, so you're not losing
Yep.
time.
There it is. Okay. Share. Here it goes. Okay, and you'll just have to tell me when you want to move the slide.
Right. That's perfect. We can go forward one slide. As you are aware, just to kind of locate ourselves, we're on the very southeast corner of the Potter Highlands district, on the corner of 33rd and Zuni, marked in red here on this slide. You can go forward one, please. And Jesse's touched on the details. I just wanted to kind of bring those to the forefront of the materials and touch on that palette. It is a pretty simple Italianate form that we're proposing here with a simple palette of materials. So the general shale Coliseum kind of blonde brick that's also been used elsewhere on infill in the district. Feel that modern color sets the duplex apart as clearly a modern project or a new infill, while still remaining contextual through the quality of materials and the detailing. The windows, the steel, the painted features, as well as cap flashing, wall sconce are all black and set into that blonde brick. It's that Benjamin Moore black or the black Fibrex on the windows, kind of throughout is the accent color there. And then just the kind of example of horizontal cedar fence, which does appear on the kind of Zuni facade as a short piece on the south side, and then on the 33rd Street face, just between the garage and then to the corner. Black metal for a low fence, enclosing the front yards for the duplex, which is, we felt, contextual again. We can go ahead to the next one. I just wanted to focus on kind of three elements. The first is to address the comments from phase one about the porches, specifically column proportions, the rail, and the placement of those columns. We did go back and revisit examples and revisit references within the district, and these are a few that are in our submittal. Looking at a more substantial column, looking at the kind of left-hand side image on 3609, 3611 North Zuni, where we have kind of paired central paired central entries with no front rail to it. And we typically see that front rail where there is a return on it, such as the center image. You can go to the next slide. So our proposal increases the scale and size of those front columns. Are now 8-inch by 8-inch square. Push them to the corners, and then detailing with a C-channel capping and then flashing above all in black around. You can go to the next slide as well to see how that all looks all together there. So more substantial, we felt, fitting within the proportions of the examples within the historic district. We've dropped that front rail and pushed the columns out to the corners as well. We go to the next slide. The next piece, 2 out of 3, is on the windows. This is a friendly comment that we had in the last round in phase one, kind of looking at the ground floor windows. We are proposing the same proportion of paired single hung windows on the ground floor as the upper floor on the front facade, and looking at a few examples of windows that are similar in scale and proportion, both on the ground floor and upper floors. I'll maybe point to the example on North Alcott, the third, with the white painted brick here, where the same window proportions are used on both upper and lower lower floors, and then on the far right as well. So we felt that our proposal was still contextual and sets it again as a of its time modern infill to the historic district, and have or are proposing to keep those ground floor windows as we have had them in the elevations. You can go to the next slide as well. And then as we turn to the north elevation, I provide some variation along the 33rd Street elevation there. Go to the next slide. And just in context as well. And then the last piece to touch on is the cornice, looking at some of the historic brick cornices within some of the example Italian duplexes that we've used as references. We can see the angled brick, we can see some stepping, and we have interpreted that for this project in, again, a kind of contextually modern way. You can go to the next slide to see how that looks in section. The main house, or sorry, duplex cornice has 6 courses of angled brick in the same blonde Colosseum standard brick, and then we're stepping out the top 3 rows, capping it with black flashing. The garage is very
Brian, it's a little hard to hear you right now. It just got a little quieter.
okay. I will speak up or move up. Can you hear me better?
A little bit. I don't know what happened.
I'll try to carry on. I don't know if it's just a technical thing.
That's better.
Better?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I was saying the cornice detail for the duplex is on the left. The garage is a scaled down version of that. So it's 4 courses of angled brick with the top 2 courses stepping out. Same brick for both, same cap flashing detail for both. Go to the next slide. Just finishing with an image of that in 3 dimensions, so that you can see how the shadows fall across those 6 courses of angled brick, and then the black lip of that cap flashing coming over the top to protect the top of the parapet. And next slide just finishes it out to show the project in context. Again, you can see we wrap that cornice on both the Zuni and 33rd side. It actually wraps on the south side as well of the duplex, and then on the garage, just facing it onto the 33rd Street face and wrapping around the corners. Just a little bit there, you can see where it stops the line. And that is it. That is all I have. I appreciate your consideration of the project.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Are there any questions for the applicant? No?
I have a question.
Yeah, Anne.
Can you, have you coursed out the, I'm actually looking at your sheet 028, which shows the openings, the rough openings for the windows. Have these windows been coursed out with the brick module?
Yes, they have.
So all of the soldier courses and so forth are even bricks?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Great. And Larry, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I did. The metal cap flashing, I was wondering, do you have a dimension proposed for the vertical visible leg of that?
You know, that is not on the drawings, but it appears to be about 1.5 inches as it comes over.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looked like on the drawing, maybe in that detail, the cornice details, it looks a little longer than maybe it appears on the 3D view, and that seemed like it could have a lot of impact if that's 1.5 inches versus 3 inches.
Yeah, absolutely. And our intention is to keep that, and I think we'd be more than happy with how it performs at 1.5 inches as in this 3D.
Can't quite hear.
Sorry, I said our intention is to keep that visible leg of the cap flashing thin. We'd be more than happy with the 1.5 inch dimension that's shown here in the 3D detail.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions? No. All right. Thank you. Are there any public comments for this project? Please use the hand raise button.
I don't see any hands raised. So no.
Okay. then we'll go ahead and move into deliberation.
And Brian, I'm going to move you back so you won't miss anything, but you, yeah.
All right. So what was everyone's thoughts about how the design details meet the guidelines? And the updates to the porch?
Madam Chair, I'll jump in. I think, as the staff report also detailed and worked through nicely, that, I think this project really lands on the form and mass side of blending in well and differentiating itself with simple details that I feel like are successful here. So I think it meets our guidelines.
Thanks, Graham. Since we've got a quiet group, I'll go ahead and chime in and agree. I agree with the staff assessment and with what Graham said. I think it looks like it will fit within the historic context nicely, and I appreciate the precedents that they looked at throughout the district to kind of come up with this. And I like that the cornice detail is a modern interpretation of kind of what's seen in the district. So I thought that was appropriate. I know I brought up a question about the privacy fence earlier, so I'll just say I don't have a problem with it. I just wanted to verify because I know typically we see vertical, but I do agree that since it's an infill, I don't find this to be inappropriate. It's still wood, meets the height limitations that we have. But looking at the site plan, it looks like it's not, normally we require it to be set back 1 foot from the facade. And I believe it's not against the Zuni Street facade. So I would propose that condition that the wood privacy fence, the rear yard fence, be set back 1 foot from the facade of the Zuni Street facade. That's my only comment. Larry, did you have any thoughts on the parapet?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with his assessment, with the applicant's assessment, that keeping that as thin as possible is ideal. I'm not, from technical standpoint, not sure how achievable 1.5 inches is. That might be a little bit thin for appropriate, to get an appropriate slope on the top of that. But I think visually that, keeping it, as close to 2 inches as possible, I think makes sense. And I would not want it to see it at 4 inches or something gigantic.
Yeah, Gary.
I wanted to kind of ask about that too, about how important it is that be as thin as possible. And I agree that it should be thin, but I'm not sure how constructible that detail that's shown is. It doesn't show any blocking, and it appears that it would rely on some sort of adhesive on the top course of masonry to hold the flashing down, which is not a conventional construction detail. And so if an alteration in the field occurred where the contractor felt they had to put blocking up there, and then that would make the fascia of that flashing wider, what is the limit to our expectation? And I agree, it should be as, to be compatible with the design as presented, it should be as thin as possible, but I guess I'm not sure how thin it can be, practically speaking, if someone decides to put some blocking on top of that top course of masonry.
I'm chiming in because I want to make sure that the conversation about that size has to do with the guidelines.
Well, it does. In other words, if we approve this based on 1.5 or 2 inches, and then when it gets built, it ends up being 4 inches because the contractor said that's the only way it's going to work, what happens then? I guess that's kind of does it become a violation, or just how does
Yeah,
How does
typically,
constructability affect this?
typically no for something that's kind of a fairly minor change like that, because adding 2 inches overall isn't that much. Adding 2 inches there might be a little, but I think the question is minimal, how minimal that is. Would that be, what guideline would require you to say that it has to be minimal to be compatible with the district? And I didn't mean stifle the conversation, sorry.
No,
I'm
it's all
willing
good.
to support it as is if there's not a guideline that can dictate that.
Anne, did you have?
I have to say, I'm actually struggling with this one, and I'm looking at guideline 4.5, which is design a new building to be recognized as current construction. And this one for me is just really at the edge of being so neutral that it's not even really making a nod to a historic form. And, I was the person who said last time that I thought using the same window all the way throughout was one of the things that made it not actually part of the, part of the configuration of a historic Italianate. And I understand and I voted for it last time, so I'm not going back to saying change the windows. But in a weird way to me, there's so little detail on this. There's the one cornice detail, and that's kind of it. And it's just hard for me. And this is also partially because of the letter that we got from the Curtis Park Historic District, whoever it was about a different project. But the idea that some of these forms are being so reduced down, and there is a very fine line between elegant and abstract and actually nothing at all. And for me, this project is right at that line. There's no base to it. I'm not terribly convinced by the soldier course and the same material for the soldier course and the sill course. I think the cornice detail is very, very interesting, but I actually looking at the detail, I find the detail to be unconvincing that that's actually the way you build that thing. And maybe Graham could weigh in. I've never built anything that had cut pieces of brick stacked up on top of each other. The porch, I guess it's better that the porch verticals are thicker, but it doesn't mean to me that it looks again like it's even though it's recognized as current construction, it's key. It has a key fixture. It respects a key fixture of the historic district. So I'm on the fence, but I'm interested in what other commissioners have to say.
Well, since you called out Graham, do you want to comment on the angled brick?
I can do that, and I may invoke Gary's opinion here also. I think that that angled brick, kind of that diagonal header in a traditional masonry wall, you'd have the benefit of multiple courses or widths that you were able to build up and tie together. And so I know as a more modern masonry veneer here, to still get that same look does not give you that same depth to work with. And so Anne, that's a good question, and I'm looking at detail 1 on the cornice detail sheet. I think it's just the same detail that's on the left on the screen as it sits. And having to fit within the plane of the wall, inside of the parapet framing there is the challenge. And I think that would be, something that, again, as you mentioned, in the field, when it's put together, it's going to be a different process than just the running bond masonry to make sure that that's properly secured and tied. But being that it's not a bearing part of the wall, I guess, it's a nod to historic detail having to fit within a modern system of construction, right? So, and Gary, if you'd like to chime in too, we've been kind of talking a lot about these kinds of things in other contexts lately.
I agree. It's a challenging thing to pull. I mean, I don't think it can be a true 45-degree diagonal. But I haven't, it needs to be drawn in plan with the actual size of units just to see how well they stack and how much overlap there is and whether it's enough to provide the level of a kind of, bond strength and tying it back to the backup, all that. I mean, it's, all of this is sort of outside of our purview, except the portrayed design shows a diagonal pattern. And so if they can't build it that way, and it comes off as something like a 60-30 angle or something much less dramatic, we still, I mean, would we be, if that was presented the way it could be built, would we still be agreeable to this design as being or having an acceptable cornice?
Let's keep in mind that if it were to change, the design were to change, it would have to come back to us. So if they determine that based on, a means and methods approach with the contractor that they can't build it, that it would have to come back to the commission. If not, it would be a violation and wouldn't pass landmark inspection.
Okay.
So
That's a substantial enough change that it would go back to the commission for sure.
yeah. So, I mean, I think we've seen other people in Potter Highlands do this exact detail with masonry veneer in the past few years. So I'm fairly confident it can be achieved. And maybe it's because there's, this has got continuous insulation. So no, it doesn't have multiple whites, but it does have a little airspace. I don't know if they, get the brick back there. I'm not sure what happened, but I do know that we have approved another infill project in Potter Highlands that I seem to recall having this detail. It wasn't necessarily in this fashion at the cornice. It was like I don't know how to explain it, but I'm fairly certain that, that's something a little beyond our purview. If we're okay with the design intent, then I think we're fine to move it forward, and they'll have to figure out how to construct it. Would be my 2 cents. But, Anne expressed some, concerns with it being too simple. Did anyone else share those concerns? I know a few people said that they felt it met the guidelines. Is there any further
I'll weigh in.
discussion?
I feel it does meet the guidelines, and I actually like the simplicity of it, and I find it rather elegant using the same materials for the sills and headers. I'm not an architect, as the body of the building, but I like the simplicity and modernity of it. And I know there have been a lot of projects approved as infill that are simple and don't read, as the historic language quite as much. And I just wanted to point one thing out regarding the fence setback you brought up, Kelly, that I like the horizontal boarding, but looking at the setback from the front facade on Zuni, there is a egress well there that is not dimensioned, and I don't know if that is within that 1 foot setback. So I guess I would say if it can't be set back a full foot, it's set back to abut that window well, perhaps, just set it back from the facade 1 foot if possible.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if I had to guess based on looking at the drawings, I think it'll fit, but that's
I think
a
it'll
fair
fit.
comment.
I just with it not being dimensioned right there, I don't know.
Yeah. Good point. All right, any other comments on this project? No? I think it sounds like we've had a pretty good discussion on this. Would someone like to try motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Graham.
I move to recommend approval of application number 2021-COA-058 for the phase 2 design details at, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong number here. I'm gonna jump to or maybe, sorry, let me look back. I think we've got an address in the motion. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
the
is
motion
given.
is incorrect and it's also not a recommendation of approval. It's
It is an approval. All right, we're going to try it again here. Madam Chair, I move to approve project number 2022-COA-055, 2400 West 33rd Avenue, per design guidelines 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, 4.8, 5.8, 5.9, 5.21, character defining features as defined for the Potter Highlands Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thanks, Graham. Do we have a second?
I'll
Madam Chair,
second.
Thank you, Erin. All right, and I have a friendly amendment. Could we add a condition to set back the rear yard fence from the Zuni Street facade 1 foot or to abut the egress well?
I'll accept.
I accept as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? No? All right, then let's call for the vote. Erin,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Julie,
aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Anne,
Nay.
Kelly, aye. All right, so we have 6 votes in favor and 1 opposed, which was Anne. So the motion passes and the project is conditionally approved. All right, the next project we have for design review today is 2022-COA-188 at 1416 Platt Street. It's the Denver Tramway power plant. So Jen's pulling up the presentation and we'll hear from Evan.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So we'll be looking at this project at 1416 Platt Street, which is an individually designated landmark structure located between the South Platte River, Interstate 25 or Platt Street, Spear Boulevard, and 15th Street. Sorry, just trying to find the arrow to progress the presentation. Is it? There we go. Okay. You always think you know how this works. Okay. So here you can see the site plan with the Tramway power plant building towards the bottom of the screen, Platt Street, the river, and 15th Street. So the structure was constructed in 1901 to house the power plant for the Denver Tramway Company, and the rehabilitated structure has served as the REI flagship store in Denver since 2000. The stock room addition is proposed to be constructed at the north elevation of the Battery building, which is a historic addition to the original structure. You can see here the area of the proposed addition in orange, and then just to the south of that, the Battery building. And just for reference, here are some other images of the structure, the top one being along Platt Street, the middle image being from along the river, and then the bottom image being from across their parking lot on the south side of the lot, or the site rather. And then here is the north elevation of the Battery building, and then as well the Platt Street elevation. So the west elevation of the Battery building, seen here facing Platt Street, features arched openings and a decorative corner piers that relate to the more ornamented brick portion of the power plant building, which you can see beyond it. However, the north elevation, shown here, is built of relatively barren concrete divided into 7 bays by simple pilasters and capped by a continuous cornice. Existing alterations to this area of the structure include a one-story loading dock structure, a trash enclosure, and a second-story egress stair, which span across the middle 5 bays of the proposed addition. So you can see the existing loading dock addition here with the trash enclosure behind it, the egress stair, and then this left-hand image is facing sort of from the other direction at the rear of the Battery building and that loading dock addition. All of these alterations are proposed to be removed in preparation for the proposed addition. Additional alterations to remain include an entrance canopy, and signage, all contained in the westernmost bay of the Battery building, which you can see here. The proposed addition will cover the middle 5 bays of the Battery building, setting it back from the primary Platt Street elevation of the historic structure. You can see kind of shown here again the area of the addition in orange and the existing building in blue, and how it will cover those middle 5 bays. And we'll jump to some renderings. So the addition will be constructed of cast in place concrete with a board form finish at the foundation level and smooth formwork finish at the 1st and 2nd stories. This choice of material is a reference to the exposed concrete of the historic Battery building. And you can see those 2 materials pictured here. And then just another image, again, more from the kind of back side of the Battery building. So the height of the addition will match that of the eaves of the Battery building. However, the addition will be separated by a 2-foot 4-inch wide gasket connection, which you can see shown in these bottom 2 elevations. At this connection, the addition will drop below the cornice of the Battery building to avoid interfering with that historic feature. And in this building section here on the right, you can see how the roof of the addition will drop below that existing historic cornice. The east and west bays of the addition will be 1 bay deep, and the north elevation will be divided into 5 bays in line with those of the historic structure. These bays will be articulated by 6-inch deep concrete pilasters. The first floor of the addition will be solid concrete with the exception of a loading dock at the east elevation, shown here, and a single entrance door at the west elevation over here. At the 2nd story, each bay will be filled with a double polycarbonate glazing system set in an aluminum frame. The applicant is proposing to use a white glazing panel that has a slight sheen, which will allow light to radiate out in the evenings and at night. So this is the some of the detail information of that glazing system. The right-hand drawing is the sort of building specific detail that the applicant provided, where you can see the glazing will be set in 6 inches, at the depth of those pilasters on the elevations. So this glazing system has not previously been reviewed by the LPC. The system is typically used in large-scale industrial or warehouse settings and is favored because the individual polycarbonate panels are easily replaced if damaged. Staff originally had concerns about its durability and appropriateness, but after examining samples of the glazing system, have found that the use of the material exclusively on a new addition could be appropriate given the industrial character of the historic building and the nature of its use on the addition. The glazing system is only being used at the 2nd story, where it will not be exposed to vehicular or pedestrian traffic, and the slight sheen of the polycarbonate gives it a finish akin to a traditional glazing material. As well, the system is being installed in traditional punched openings like those seen on the historic structure. The applicant had provided samples of the material and the assembly to staff as well. Along with construction of the addition, the applicant is proposing a few minor alterations to the rear of the Battery building and the site along the alley. There is an existing loading dock opening at the east elevation of the Battery building, which the applicant is proposing to partially infill with galvanized steel panels to convert to a standard door. So you can see that here, this sort of dark gray outline is the existing structure, and then all the black is of course the new, and you can see that existing loading dock infilled there. And we have that in elevation as well. And these are the images of the materials, the galvanized steel. The new door will also be covered with a new metal canopy to match the existing, which could be seen at the northwest corner of the Battery building. And a new metal landing and stairs will be constructed to provide access. And there, again, that's the image of the existing awning, which will be, or canopy rather, which will be matched. Additionally, the applicant has proposed a new metal trash enclosure that will enclose a portion of the site along the north elevation of the main portion of the historic structure. The enclosure will not connect to the historic fabric, but will instead be an existing, abut an existing non-historic site retaining wall and fence. So you can see that sort of retaining wall running along the north side of the historic structure in the area of the enclosure. And then what's photographed is the existing trash enclosure, which will be removed to construct the addition. And the intention is just to match the appearance of that existing trash enclosure. So given that the proposed addition will be subordinate to the historic structure by being set back from Platt Street, that the addition will be constructed of contemporary materials that relate to the construction and materiality of the historic structure, and that the proposed site work matches the industrial character of the building and will have minimal impact on the historic structure, staff are recommending approval of this application.
Thank you, Evan. Are there any questions for staff? No. All right. Can we promote the applicant?
Yep, just second.
Yeah.
I realized that I didn't want to move prevent Evan from being able to control the screen, and yet can't do two things at once. There we go. All right, sorry about that. We got a bunch of applicants. Hold on, moving them all over. He's not here. He's not here. I think I got them all. Yep.
Great. All right. So please go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready. And anyone who plans on speaking during the 10 minutes, just provide us with your name and address for the record. Time is yours.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. Hi, I'm Douglas Stone. I'm with Callison RTKL. We're architects for REI at 1416 Platt Street. And thank you for your time today. So we are proposing this addition for multiple reasons. One is it's part of a larger redevelopment of adjacent site, which does have some impact that requires this addition to be built. We've looked at trying to one of the reasons also we're looking at this is that if you looked at some of the prior photos, there's a whole bunch of Connex boxes that are currently in the parking area that have been used for excess storage. So the store has exceeded its current capacity. So we are looking at this addition to basically be able to get rid of those Connex boxes that are used for storage. And as Evan had pointed out, this project proposes to follow a lot of the Denver guidelines in terms of being a contemporary building, but also being respectful to the size and proportions of the original building. This building is actually a conglomeration of 3 additions with 1901, 1911, and then Battery Building being built in 1924. And the prior loading dock was sort of a smaller element, which sort of felt like an add-on. And with this addition, we're kind of going up to the line of the gutter, which is kind of acts as a cornice here, and using that as our datum line to work off of. But then if you look at the front sort of end facade, that is higher. So it kind of does kind of 2 things. One is it's respectful for the current size of the at elevation on the side, but also feels a little bit, it's become subordinate to that structure as well. Again, our materials that we're using here are concrete, which is kind of in line with the adjacent building to it, and kind of going with the smooth as well as the board form. One other item where I think one of the comments that Evan said about the polycarbonate, another reason we're looking to use it is it does a really good job of diffusing light and keeps any kind of activity behind that concealed. And if you look at photos of the current loading dock, there's a panel window. It's kind of similar to ours, a clear story window that goes to the very top, and it's actually been boarded over because they have stock all the way up there. So it kind of has become sort of a bit of an eyesore in terms of the original intent of having a nice clear window and having that window be a part of the building element. It's now being kind of obstructed by, so maybe that photo there, you can sort of see the cardboard that's kind of gone up there. So the polycarbonate does a really good job of diffusing light and keeping anything that's put up close to the window, because this will be used as a stock area. So we're looking to maximize the space behind there. Another element, Evan, I know we had a conversation about the color, which is white. Prior to our submitting that, our samples got delayed, and there's two whites. There's a regular white and an Arctic white, and I would like to propose that this be considered for the Arctic white. I think the white itself looks a bit too much like a milk bottle versus having some kind of a transition, looking like a window. This project, we've looked at trying to maintain the proportions and the bays of the battery building and carrying those proportions with the bays that we set up for our facade. And I think our presentation, what Evan has presented, kind of speaks for what we're doing here. And then just one other thing I also note about the configuration of the new trash enclosure is that it's sort of spaced, and the layout is to complement an XL power and gas easement that's going to be running parallel to the building. So that's sort of that dashed line that you kind of see there. So that's sort of way we've spaced it out and just basically having minimal impact with that. So I don't know if there's any other comments or any questions that you would have for us.
Great, thank you for your time. Are there any questions for the applicant? I just had one, or Larry, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just one question. What is the material being proposed for the gasket?
The gasket.
That was my question too.
Yeah, it's actually it's in our materials palette. It's a product that is I believe it's a silicone gasket that allows for building movement. It's the Balco ECVS bronze.
Gotcha. On page 26 of the application materials, Larry, I missed it too. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? No. All right. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Are there any public comments on this project? Please use the hand raise button at this time.
Sorry, Evan and I are both trying to use the mouse at the same time, and I can unmute myself.
No problem. I don't see any hands raised.
I don't see any hands raised
Okay.
either. Thank you.
Great. All right, so let's move into deliberation. How does everyone feel this proposal meets the guidelines? Larry, go for it.
Sure. If I can just jump in with a question regarding the glazing. So I was just, because it's talked about in terms of glazing, I was looking at the guidelines, and there is a definition of glazing that specifically states that it's glass. And so just wondering if approving a polycarbonate material as a glazing creates a precedent.
That's a really good question. And Jen, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I think, so typically we require clear glass be installed, but I see that as like your standard window. This is kind of interesting since it's an industrial use and like storage.
Yeah, I think, you would need to come up with a reason why it's a unique circumstance to not meet that guideline, I think is how you would not make that a precedent.
Yeah. I do think this is a unique circumstance. It's not like it's someone's house that's proposing, non-clear, non-transparent glass in their window. I feel like the fact that they mentioned how shielding view is important because of the storage behind it. which makes sense to me. And I would hate to see just a bunch of boxes and pallets and stuff through clear glass. I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose. So I personally think this is a unique circumstance for that reason, and not having it there would just be more solid mass. So I think that the translucent panels at least add, like, break it up a bit. So I think that's successful to kind of align with existing proportions. And so I personally think it is kind of a unique circumstance, but I'd love to hear what you and the rest of the commission think.
Well, if I can chime in, I mean, I totally agree that it is an appropriate design choice for this circumstance. And I think that given that the applicant has cited these reasons that are particular to this project, and it's clear that the project is, you know, as you said, Kelly, not a typical like residential window here, that I don't find concern about that.
Good comment, though. And what did everybody else think about that?
Madam Chair, this is Julie. I actually do think it is a good use of this product. You're right. We don't want to see the boxes and the stacks behind them. I also, to be honest with you, I actually like the way it distinguishes. I mean, no one will mistake this for original construction. This is new construction, and it's unapologetic, and I think it serves the purpose. I feel like it might be a little large, and my only concern is, is it too large? Is it actually the right size to be for this building? But that's really, I mean, other than that, the actual size of it, and I understand why they have to have storage. I've been in that store a number of times, but the look of it, I think, is appropriate, and I'm good with the glazing as well.
Thanks, Julie. Any other thoughts on the mass, the size of it?
I'll jump in and just say that I agree. I think even though this building kind of sits on a pedestal by itself, where you can here the parking lot that shares its space with my brother's bar, and everything is very much kind of a secondary facade in its feel. And so I think the matching materiality and the proportions and everything will feel very natural, and again differentiate themselves, like Julie said. So I think between the staff report analysis and our presentation, I feel very comfortable with it as well.
Thanks, Graham. Any other comments on this? Yeah, Anne.
I agree, and I think that the main tramway building is sort of the star of the show, and this is definitely subordinate, but I think it does a very sensitive job of picking up on the pilasters, which was even in the second edition. You could see the pilasters and sort of the scale of those upper level windows. And I really think that the applicant's done a terrific job, and that I completely agree with the staff report.
Well said. And I saw nodding heads. So I'm going to take that as we're coming to some consensus. Would someone like to make a motion? Unless there's further discussion required.
I could make them. Oh, Erin, did you want to make the motion?
Sure, I can. Although I call this the Forney Museum, not the Tramway. I approve application 2022-COA-188 for the construction of a 2-story addition, loading dock alterations, and construction of a new trash enclosure as per design guidelines 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.11, 3.12, 5.16, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Erin. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Graham. All right. If there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call for the vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
Kelly. Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes. So the project is approved. Next project on the design review agenda today is 2022-COA-189 at 3001 Mead Street.
Okay, let me make sure I can, okay, there. Steer this before I start this time. Okay. So 3001 Mead Street is currently a garage structure sitting on a predominantly open lot at the northwest corner of the intersection of Mead Street and West 30th Avenue. This is just a Google Street View of that corner. On the left, you can see a historic structure at 3715 West 30th Avenue. And then kind of in the back here, between these trees is the existing garage structure in question. So I'll jump to the site plan here. So we were looking from this corner, the garage structure, and then the adjacent historic structures. So in 2017, the Landmark Preservation Commission approved splitting of this lot and the existing garage from the remainder of the parcel, which is associated with 3715 West 30th Avenue, the structure I just referenced, which is contributing to the Wolf Place Historic District. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing garage into a new single-family residence, given the scale of the alterations proposed for the structure, and that this project will raise the profile of the garage from a non-residential secondary structure to a new primary structure. Staff have determined that the project should be reviewed as new infill through our two-step process. So this review is for the phase 1 mass form and context application. So both sides of Mead Street between West 30th and West 32nd Avenues retain a strong historic character with no previously reviewed infill structure, with one previously reviewed infill structure at 3027 Mead Street, which was completed in 2014. Mead Street is here, the site in question here, and then this rather large structure with the solar panels, if you can make that out in this aerial, is the that other infill structure. The historic structure, all other structures on the block appear to be contributing to the district. The historic structures are predominantly gable or hipped roof single-family homes, ranging from 1 to 2 stories in height with dormers, cross gables, and some variation in massing, with all having front porches. These forms are predominant throughout the district, with historic flat roof structures being rare. The applicant is proposing to take the existing 1-story gabled brick and frame garage and convert it to a residential use. The proposal does not include the creation of any additional interior floor space. Instead, it consists of reconfiguring openings on the structure and constructing a 10-foot tall privacy wall as a false facade to enclose a portion of the yard between the existing structure and the street, creating the illusion of a flat roofed structure. So on the left here is the site plan. The grayed out area is the existing footprint, which is to remain. And then you can see the footprint of the proposed wall, which then is shown in elevation to the right of that. Jumping ahead here. So the applicant has proposed a primary street setback of 24 feet, which is less than the adjacent historic structure, which has a 32-foot setback. But falls within the range of street setbacks found on this block. As you can see in the demonstration, there are some that, as little as 15 feet, though typically around 20 feet. The proposed structure will leave the southern portion of the lot largely undisturbed to retain the existing trees and landscaping that occupy the majority of the site. So that's where the sort of garden corner lot is labeled. The proposed height of the false facade is modest and will align with the typical first floor heights found within the district. The false facade will be divided into 2 sections around a 6-foot wide inset entrance gate. Both of these sections will feature punched masonry openings. The north section, I may have a better image here. Hold on. There we go. The north section will align roughly with the north elevation of the garage structure with a slight return to the west. This section will also feature a single punched opening towards the north, which will be filled with a brick trellis rather than a window assembly. The south section will extend past the south elevation of the garage and return to the west to overlap it. This section will feature two openings on the east elevation, one that will contain a shutter and the other that will quote unquote break the corner and be filled with a brick trellis like the north opening as well. There will be two additional large doorway openings at the south elevation. The applicant is proposing to include a decorative brick cornice and string coursing at the false facade walls, the details of which would of course be discussed in the Part 2 application. Staff have several concerns with the proposed design, namely the roof form of the structure, its overall width, the proposed fenestration pattern, and the lack of a front porch. Staff were only able to identify two other flat roof primary structures within the district, 3104 Osceola and 3115 Newton Street, which are pictured here on the right and left respectively, meaning that the flat roof form is uncommon. The existing structure does have a gable roof, which will be retained, but the design intent is to give the impression of a flat roof structure, and the existing gable will either not be perceptible from the street or will appear incongruous with the intended flat roof appearance of the structure. The proposed structure will also be significantly wider than most structures in the district at approximately 44 feet. Most structures range from 20 to 30 feet in width, with the widest of these typically being broken up at the front facade with a projecting bay or nested gable. The applicant has shown that the widths of the two sections of the front facade at approximately 19 feet are typical of the narrower structures or bays on structures around the district, and that the 6-foot gap is typical of spacing between structures. However, staff have concerns about the approach of making a single structure appear as two separate structures to break up the oversized width. Namely, staff question if that is really that successful here, and even if it were, is it appropriate to be utilized in infill construction? The proposed fenestration pattern reinforces some of the above concerns. The proposed openings are highly irregular and lack the vertical proportions of windows on historic structures throughout the district. As well, these two separate masses meant to read as separate structures lack any sort of entrance, like separate entrances that would follow the typical patterns of the district. And here are just some renderings. Additionally, the proposed structure lacks a front porch, which is an almost universal character defining feature of the district. Even those other two flat roof structures that were identified have partial or full width porches. Staff had encouraged the applicant to consider an approach that would instead of introducing this false facade, would introduce a full width porch onto the existing garage. However, the applicant did not explore this recommendation, at least to our knowledge. Staff would also like to point out that while the intent of the design is to create a new facade for the structure, the proposed false facade could be interpreted as an overheight solid front yard privacy wall. Typically, solid front yard walls or fences are not allowed and are instead required to be no more than 4 feet tall and at least 50% open. Staff would like to state that the proposed design is a very creative approach to the scope of converting the existing garage to a new primary structure, and that the commission may wish to discuss in detail whether the design meets the intent of the guidelines more so than the letter of them. The scale of the project is quite modest and will likely not have a significant negative impact on the overall district. Regardless, staff did not find that we could recommend approval of the project based on the choice of a flat roof structure, the oversized width of the false facade, the irregular arrangement and proportions of the fenestration pattern, and the lack of a front porch, the lack of a front porch and the use of a solid overheight privacy wall in the front yard. Therefore, staff are recommending denial of the phase 1 mass form and context application. Additionally, I'd just like to note that this was referred to the R&O, who provided comment, which was included with the application materials. The R&O did show their support for the project, but they also did express some concern over the lack of a front porch on the structure.
Thanks, Evan. Are there any questions for staff?
I just want to clarify that this is really creating a courtyard. It's not a roofed structure. It's a courtyard space. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why it's more of a false facade than an actual facade on the structure.
And there's no roof whatsoever, not even like slats or something. One of the kind of shadows in the perspective kind of looked like maybe there was something else, and I'm not sure if I'm reading it right.
I believe, let me just check the plans.
Yeah, I don't see anything in the plan. I just want to make sure I was reading it correctly.
Yeah, I guess maybe it was in a different version. I thought that there was, it's actually shown sort of vaguely in the ground plan comparison that there was an intention at the south wall of the existing structure where there would be a connection between it and the sort of false facade wall with like a pergola, I think is what it looks like. But it isn't particularly clear in the floor plan provided.
And we can have the applicant clarify that as well. So great. Any other questions for staff? No? All right. Well, I see that we have the applicant with us now. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Please start with your names and addresses for the record, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Right. Well, my name is Charles Arnold, and my address is 1261 Steel Street, Denver, Colorado, 80206.
And my name is Ted Schultz, architect, 863 Santa Fe Drive in Denver.
Well,
and you all can hear us.
Can you hear us? Okay, we were technically challenged there at the start, so I'm sorry we didn't visually appear for a few minutes. Let me just start and say that Ted and I started this project, I think, like everybody else that wants to build on a lot. We took some time and tried to create a residence, a house that we thought was interesting and made sense. And every time we did that, we realized that we were sacrificing what was most important about the property, and that was the garden. This property has never had a structure on it, a house on it. Beth Grenfell lived next door for a little over 90 years until 2015 when I bought the property. And so we realized what was most important was this wonderful garden on the corner. It's what we love and it's what the neighbors love. So we took a little bit different approach and decided that we needed to have the garden totally drive the design process. And that's why we came to the conclusion that what we really needed to do is focus on the renovation of the garage. The challenge was that the garage is only 897 square feet. And there's a reason nobody builds small houses. They're not economically viable, both from a financial standpoint, they lose money. And also it's hard to get the utility out of the structure simply because it's so small. So by extending the east wall of the house to the new location of the east wall, we created this indoor-outdoor living space that activated the garden as well. And that's sort of how we came to the basic design.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ted. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that really led us to, we realized as we created the design that we were starting to hit on some of the primary core reasons for the guidelines and for the Wolf Place Design District. It was brought up, one of the defining features of Denver in our historic neighborhoods are the eclectic nature of the neighborhoods. And when we presented to the Design Preservation Committee, they really spoke of the love eclecticism of Wolf Place as a district, and that there's a vitality there that if you simply parrot every feature of the neighboring buildings, you really deaden down the historic district. And we've read a lot, and I think we'll read to you just as a reminder, the definitions of compatibility are promoting the rhythms, the features, just really the gut feel of the neighborhood. And so while Evan has pointed out that there's a few ways that we are not overtly mimicking and parroting every feature of the neighborhood, we've worked really hard to build a project that fits the ethos and is strongly and intensely compatible with the historic nature of the neighborhood, and that in fact carries it on to the future and gives it that energy. The feedback that we've gotten from the review committee in the neighborhood, I think really speaks to that. They are, I think, just over the moon with the project, which we take as we take very seriously, and very, very excited that they feel that way. Because Chuck desperately wants a project that respects the garden and fits in with it. So the key feature that talks about sustainability as in the introduction to guidelines, it talks about the benefits of preservation. And really there's three, and they're all related to sustainability: economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and under cultural and social sustainability, it says preserving historic places promotes cultural and social sustainability by supporting everyday connections between residences and the cultural heritage of the community. It also makes Denver a more livable place. We think this is probably the strongest point of the design. The garden, if you spend 20 minutes in that garden, you will have numerous conversations with people that come by and just love this corner garden that's been there for 90 years. And they, Chuck calls it the magic garden, with the interaction you have with people. So this is mimicking or not mimicking, but trying to be respectful and compatible with the smaller buildings in the neighborhood, of which there are many, and the little flat roof building that you see. And there's some other flat roof structures right on the edge on 32nd that are part of the neighborhood, that are residential, that were the massing and the window proportions are directly taken from the two houses around the corner, and also fit the massing and brick and detailing and foundations and brick banding that you find all up and down the block. And we felt, after really looking hard at the front porch addition, which was brought up in our design committee meeting, we felt like the representation of two smaller structures that separate with the entry between them, the front porch would just overtly make it feel like a very wide house, when this one does speak to the rhythm and the proportions of the two smaller houses.
I might also add that the area to the east of the new structural wall, that's all concrete today. And so all of that concrete is replaced by new garden space. So we're actually adding more garden than is what is currently there. We're replacing the concrete with garden and bringing it in front of that wall, to where that wall really works as a backdrop, almost like a trellis for new landscaping.
Yeah, we thought, just to share with you some of the comments that we did get. We had 13 neighbors come. You have their comments there. We had some donuts and stuff out front. And really, I would encourage you to look at their comments there that they wrote. You know, I approve, exclamation point, great idea. Love the use of the structure with the garden. You know, this is creating this massing and proportion and detailing that highly fits and compatible with the neighborhood, but also being of its time. I don't think someone would mistake this as 100 years old, but yet look at it and really feel the essence of how it fits in. So the people say, great job, I love it. At the Design Preservation Commission, we had some extraordinary comments. One member just literally was almost in tears and said, I wish this house was next to me. This is someone that lives in the neighborhood that just loves what it's doing for the neighborhood. At the end, the commission asked us if we would do more projects in the neighborhood. This is what they're looking for. They really are excited about a house that integrates and has a conversation with the neighborhood in this way. So
anything else to add?
I think just read that quote
Yeah,
about
let me just read
compatibility.
this. You know, there are a couple things about compatibility. in the guidelines, and I'll just read, it says compatibility is achieved when a new building has a sufficient number of design variables which are similar in execution, but not necessarily identical to typical design variables in the surrounding historical context. And another section reads, a new building may use a variety of designs to achieve compatibility. These may include simplified interpretations of historic styles or creative contemporary designs that incorporate compatible features. And that's on page 73 of the guidelines.
Yeah. So we would, just in closing, we feel like we've really, as Evan said, I think maybe it's a good thing that we haven't overtly hit every one of them. And when you read about compatibility, I think you'd have a really not a very energetic participant in the neighborhood. And that, but we feel strongly that in the details that you're seeing today, and truly in the proportions of the windows, the massings, particularly the thoughtful representation and the use of the house, the sustainability of keeping the garage, et cetera, I think profoundly fits in the Wolf Place Historic District.
Thank you. Your time is up, but thank you so much. Are there any questions for the applicants? Yeah, Anne.
A question. And maybe Evan said this at the beginning, but is the garage a contributing structure?
No,
it's not. It's from the 60s.
Probably the 60s.
They did ask us, and to not consider this an addition, but because the garage was not originally a habitable structure, to go ahead and consider this an infill structure. So but still keeping that existing structure itself.
All right. Any other questions for the applicants?
Did I?
No. All right. Thank you for your time. Are there any public comments on this project? Please use the hand raise button.
Yep, we have Paul. Go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready,
And
Paul.
please start with your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Paul Floyd. I live at 3033 Yates Street. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to restart your time.
Could the applicant please mute?
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
figure out how to mute.
Sorry about that. Have a family emergency, and I apologize.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could just mute, that'd be great. All right, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, well, I'll just go down my list here. So you have our letter from last December where we recommended to you approval of this project. As Ted mentioned, several of the items that were discussed when he met with us and Charles to discuss the project. We very much like the scale of the project. I've been on the committee for 9 years. I've never seen an infill project that was held to 1 story. I think that was part of the excitement on our part, that somebody was really paying attention to appropriate scale for the neighborhood. Materials, brick, again, unusual that new infill would use brick so extensively as this one does. The form references what I call the terrace form as used by History Colorado. And yes, the staff report points out the 2 examples. There's actually a 3rd example in the district itself, which is now buried behind a late 1940s addition. So it's a little more common than you might think. In addition, if you go up Mead Street to 32nd Avenue, I think Ted mentioned this, and you take a left, there are 2 duplexes that are now commercially used, but would have been originally residential buildings. And they are also of the terrace form. And then going further, if you expand out very close to the district, there are additional examples of this terrace form. So I won't pretend that it's common, but I would say it's not quite as rare as just the 2 that are officially in the district. So again, we appreciate all that. Charles touched on the preservation of the garden and how much the neighbors feel for that, as did our committee. And I'd like to point out, it is a corner lot. So that garden really is a landmark in itself,
Thank
a
you,
landscape
Paul.
landmark. So
Thank
that's
you,
all.
Paul.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any comments or any other public comments?
I don't see any more public comment. Oh, yep, one more. Stuart, hold on a second. You can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, sorry for the late entrance. My name is Stuart Hayden, 2525 Grape Street. And first, I just wanted to, again, commend the applicants here for their creativity, but also for keeping it, pretty small scale, and for reusing the garage. I think it's pretty commendable to do that, considering it's non-contributing. I don't, however, agree that it really fits within the community, and I don't really see it as a terrace type either, considering that the actual building itself, is a gabled structure. And I think the combination of the two is a little confusing, and I think that that's where it's sort of held back, in that for as creative as it is, using that garden wall, I think is kind of what is taking away from the project. And if that were lower, I think it would be more open, and the garden would be accentuated even more. The structure would be the same size, and I think it would be easy to approve the project. But as it is now, for what it's worth, I think it's pretty neat, and I'm excited to see what happens to it, but I don't necessarily think it's quite what I would want to see going forward. So for what that's worth, thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. Are there any other public comments? Please use the hand raise button.
I don't see any more hands raised.
All right, then we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and move into deliberation. All right, or Evan, did you have some recap?
Yeah, just wanted to comment on Paul's comment about the frequency of the terrace type. And, I entirely agree that throughout the city of Denver, you see quite a lot of these, but it's quite interesting that I think they really are quite uncommon within this district. And some of the ones that are immediately adjacent to the district seem to have been excluded. So I guess just for clarification, there's a lot of discussion at various meetings about, what is the context that you can look at? And there are a number of terrace types that are just outside the district, but therefore not within it. And when staff was reviewing this, didn't consider them as part of the context. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Otherwise, again, I would just emphasize again that we also found there's a lot to admire about this project, but I think I hope I clearly outlined the specific concerns we have with this. So.
Yeah, you did. You were very clear. So thank you, Evan. And I appreciate you recapping the definition for historic context, because we have struggled with that in the past, determining what is what is context. So yeah, let's move into deliberation. What did everybody think? This is a very unique project. I reviewed this and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know. I don't even know what to do about it. And it's quite lovely. It's a really cool design. But yeah, I would love to hear what everybody thinks. Gary, do you want to kick it off? You unmuted.
I think I share the dilemma about this. I mean, I think this is a very nicely executed concept. The trouble is, it breaks all the rules. Our rules, the guidelines. I mean, it doesn't really meet any of the guidelines. And the question then becomes, for us to justify its approval, the justification really relies on a very kind of broad acceptance of how it meets the guidelines in a very kind of general way, not as specific as we usually do. And then I'm really concerned about the precedent, because that front facade, or the facade that faces Mead Street, you know, it's a building wall, but is it a fence as well? And then how many more solid masonry fences, 8 or 10 feet high, will we see? Because, you know, we allowed this back in 2022. So, and the reason we would have allowed it, if we do allow it, is because of how well it's executed. The problem is we see so many projects that they meet the guidelines, but they're not as well executed. So it's like, you know, design review can prevent really bad design, but it doesn't necessarily foster great design. And you know, I'm not.
It can.
It can,
Let's not-
but it. You
Let's
know,
not.
No, I'm not criticizing design review. I'm just talking about one of the limitations of design review is that it doesn't. It's rare that it implements great design, because it depends on the skill of the designer and how the designer approaches the guidelines. And I just, you know, this is very troublesome. I can understand why the neighborhood association likes this project. It preserves a very important asset of the neighborhood in that landscaped area on the corner. You know, there's lots of things to recommend the project, but none of those things have a lot to do with meeting the guidelines. So that's a problem. So I'd like to hear what other people think.
I completely agree with you, Gary. And, you know, Evan did a great job of showing, you know, how it meets or does not meet many of the guidelines in section 4. But when I was looking at it, I was like, those are site walls. Shouldn't I be looking at section 5, like, or chapter 5? And because, yeah, I really struggle because I don't see how to get around looking at these as just huge site walls. To me, it's not even like an infill building. We're looking at big site walls next to an existing non-contributing building. And I don't even know what the elevations of the non-contributing building look like now, because this site wall is obscuring it. But I agree with you. It's a very well thought out. I just don't see how it meets the guidelines, and I agree with your comment about precedent concerns. Aaron, what did you think?
Well, I'm in agreement that I don't read this as a building, but as site walls. And so like a lot of the design guidelines reference don't apply in my mind, like roof form and porch, because I read this as a courtyard wall, which is why I asked the question to make sure that was a courtyard and not a fully enclosed building. That is really challenging to review this one. And I really like the project, which, you know, makes it even more challenging at being in this historic district. So I just want to throw that out there, that I read this as walls as well, not a structure or a building. That doesn't help everybody else.
Well, yeah, I see some nodding heads. Is that kind of where everybody's at? Anne, what do you think?
No, I agree. And I think Aaron is totally correct. And also, I guess I have a problem with the basic premise of the project, which is to preserve a 1960s garage. Because I think there would be some cases where we might look at something like this in some lens, and I don't know what it would be, because we've seen very tiny contributing buildings on large sites before. We sort of have come up against that before. And sometimes that, in order to preserve a a small contributing building, you might sort of go out of your way to do one thing or another. But in this case, this is to preserve a 1960s garage. So the premise of the project is really a little bit unclear to me from a guideline point of view. We're not doing anything to preserve a contributing building. We're just adding exactly as Aaron said. But one thing I will say is I really respect the scale of the project, and the applicant clearly can do anything. And I would say, you know, to do something in small scale exactly in the same place that actually had more to do with the fabric of the historic district, I have no question that they can do it. But I don't think that that's what this is.
Larry, what were your thoughts?
Oh, just wanted to say that, yeah, I agree with the comments that everyone else has, and the challenge of whether this is evaluated as a building, which it appears to be trying to project that image, or as a site wall or set of site walls, which it functionally is, but isn't necessarily trying to project. And I think either way, it doesn't, seem to sort of meet the requirements or the guidelines around either of those. And I also, admire the heart that goes into this idea of preserving the garden. But I think that, it's asking for far too generous of a read from us, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right. Well, it sounds like we're all in agreement here that, although it's quite interesting and beautiful, just a stretch to understand how it meets the guidelines. If that's accurate and there's no other input here, would someone like to make a motion?
I can make the motion.
Thanks, Anne.
Madam Chair, I move to deny application 2022-COA-189 for the mass form and context of the proposed infill at 3001 Mead Street as per design guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.7, 4.8, 4.10, and 4.15, character defining features for the Wolf Place Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gary. All right, if there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call for the vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
And Kelly? Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes. The project is denied.
Can we take 5 minutes?
I was just going to say that. I was like, seeing as it's after 3, should we have a little bathroom break?
Yes, please.
All right, we'll reconvene in just a minute. All right, thank you. We're back after a quick bathroom break and ready to keep moving. So the next project up for design review is 2022-COA-159 at 3012 Champa Street. So Becca.
Let's see if I can advance the screen. Great. All right, so our next project is a mass form and context review for infill construction at 3012 Champa Street. And just as a note before we get started, this project and the next project for review at 3022 Champa Street are both designed by the same architect. So the packet makes reference to both designs. However, they will be reviewed separately. So this lot is part of the Denver Housing Authority's redevelopment of the Platt Valley homes. The DHA has reconfigured the block, demolishing several buildings and dividing part of the block into new zone lots to be sold off for single-family residential development. The DHA issued an RFP for development of the lots and encouraged projects that included ADUs, used brick as a primary material, and had 20-foot primary front setbacks. There are no historic properties on this block for the applicant to use as reference, so they have pulled from the surrounding Curtis Park neighborhood. The LPC has reviewed 4 new single-family projects on the Champa Street side of this former DHA site. So the applicant is currently proposing a new 2-story single-family residence. The proposed infill construction is an Italianate structure with a partial width front porch and a rooftop deck. The secondary ADU structure is a flat roof form with an exterior staircase accessed via the alley, as you can see here. So the primary structure has a setback of 20 feet, which is a standard setback for infill on this block. And the front porch encroaches 7 feet into the front setback, which is also typical for infill on this block. The primary structure is entirely within the front 65% of the zone lot, while the ADU is located in the rear 35% of the zone lot. The side interior setback is 3 feet, and the applicant is currently proposing 2 egress/light wells that encroach into the side setback. Landmark staff does have some concerns with that the light well on the south side of the property and the ADU exterior stair do not meet zoning standards and have asked that the applicant do a zoning only review before the design detail submittal. So features drawn from the Curtis Park Historic District's Italianate residence include the flat roof, partial width front porch, decorative cornice, and tall windows. The entrance on the new constructions offset a feature found on other Italianate residences within the district. The proposed infill also features a large arched window on the first floor. While this is not a character-defining feature of the Italianate style, it is found on some Italianate buildings within the district, and it was recently approved on this nearby infill project for this DHA site. Features that will distinguish the new infill as new construction include a simplified porch design, a simplified cornice and windows, and a connected brick sill detailing. So the proposed infill has an overall height of 26 feet or 30 feet when measured to the roof deck stair overrun, which is within the height found in the district and on other homes approved for the DHA site. And I'll just run quickly through the elevations for the structure. Here you can see the front and side elevation showing the tall, narrow windows on the front facade, the simplified cornice and porch. On the rear and side elevations, you can see that there's a slightly different window pattern and ratio than found on the front facade. And then finally, the ADU elevations. Please note that the packet is missing one elevation for the ADU, which will need to be corrected before the design detail submittal and further permitting, but it is a very plain facade, so we think you could review it now. The proposed ADU carries through some of the design elements from the primary residence, including the flat roof and tall, narrow windows. As I mentioned before, staff does have concerns with the screening for this exterior staircase, as you can see here, which reads more like an overheight wall and may not meet zoning requirements. So in looking at the overall design of this structure, staff found that while the proposed design met the design guidelines for form and context, we did have some concerns with some of the massing elements that are proposed. Window locations and proportions vary on the structure, with tall, narrow windows on the front of the structure and larger, wider windows on the sides. The window proportions on the front of the structure are of a similar ratio to those found in Curtis Park, although they are significantly taller than the windows found in the historic context. Looking at the comparison, you can see here those window widths and heights. So staff found that this window ratio created a facade where the spacing between the header of the arched window on the first floor and the sill on the second story is quite narrow. The location of the windows on the second story leaves a larger parapet than is found in the historic context. And staff does have some concerns that this solid to void ratio on the front facade does not match district patterns due to the height and location of those front facade windows. Shortening the windows may help the front facade better reflect the proportions of the historic context. The proposed infill also has a small, simple cornice on the front facade. The building has minimal scaling elements, lacking a belt course, dormers, or other facade articulation, which may be appropriate for a modern building. However, staff felt a stronger cornice may help the building better relate to the historic context and may be part of the design detail review. And then the windows on the side elevations, especially the northwest elevation, are not characteristic of the historic context. Staff would recommend using traditional window proportions on the side of elevations as well. And while the porch is a partial width porch as found in the historic context, the porch roof extends across, the porch roof extends across approximately half of the front facade. Traditional partial width porches in the Curtis Park Historic District are typically 1/3 of the width of the facade. And just as a reference, this project was referred to the Curtis Park RNO for their review, along with 3022 Champa. These comments were included in the commission's packet for review. Overall, the RNO was supportive of the project, but did have a few concerns that they detailed in their letter. And so overall, staff finds that this modern interpretation of an Italianate structure generally meets our guidelines for form and context. However, with the concerns listed earlier, staff is recommending conditional approval of this project with the following conditions. One, that the applicant reduce the height of the upper story windows on the front facade to match traditional solid to void relationship. Two, narrow the porch roof to be approximately 1/3 of the building width. 3, use a more traditional ratio for side elevation windows. And 4, remove the exterior stair on the ADU.
Thank you, Becca. Are there any questions for staff? No? All right, let's promote the applicant then. And when you're ready, go ahead and unmute yourself. Please start with your name and address for the record. You have up to 10 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Nick Leggett. I am at 2959 Franklin Street in Denver. I am obviously the designer of this project and the designer of the next project. So you'll see me twice today. This is a modern interpretation of an Italianate, as staff already mentioned to you. The materiality is very common in Curtis Park. It is a full brick building, every elevation. We worked extensively with the Curtis Park Neighborhood Organization to develop both this house and the next house. As the Curtis Park neighborhood is one of the most eclectic and exuberant architectural representations in this city. It contains, as you well know, some of the greatest architectural masterpieces in the city from a residential standpoint, from incredible breadth of execution and economic level and stylistic level. And so we really wanted to bring some simplified versions of these exuberant houses into this rather historic opportunity to provide a massive infill in a historic district. So we really, with this house specifically, we really wanted to honor the very common Italianate form within this neighborhood and kind of supersize the openings in a way that were still historically relevant and contextual. But these houses are across Champa from Curtis Park itself, which is a kind of opportunity that you also don't often have in infill construction to build across the street from a really beautiful park. So we wanted to maximize views and exposure for those for the future occupants of this house. Regarding staff's comments and the conditions for approval, we're happy to adjust as suggested, and we're excited to deliberate with y'all and figure out what the best course forward is. So I think that's all I have to say about this house.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? No? Looks like we're all clear. Thanks. Any public comments on behalf of this project? Yeah, Keith. Jen, you're on mute, but Keith, you can unmute yourself when you're ready. You know the drill.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, Curtis Park Design Review Chair. We did review this, and we have worked extensively with Nick on this project, and we love it. We think that it's a great kind of take. Again, as you know, there's a lot of vernacular, and it is a lot of things that came in on the railway, and what window came here and what window came there, and so things got put together a lot on site. So as you saw in the presentation, those 3 Italianates had 3 different ratios between the upper and lower stories, as well as the amount of forehead to those properties. And so how do you say what is atypical or what is typical in Curtis Park? That is, you know, not something that really happens. There were 3 different styles. One had arch, one didn't. We do have Italianates that have walkout windows. And so those are floor to ceiling windows where you could literally walk out onto your porch. So that is a feature in Curtis Park, and those window proportions are appropriate. As far as the side windows, it's a narrow lot. This commission has continually approved varying size of windows on our narrow lots without having a hesitation or a second thought. The entrance for the ADU as a side staircase, again, this commission has previously approved that. The hiding or the screening wall is something that does need to be talked about, but as far as the exterior staircase or the placement of that exterior staircase has been previously approved. The precedent is there. It is therefore should be allowed on this project. So the roof on the front porch, again, typically it's 1/3. But again, he's taking liberties here to show it of its time, and not just absolutely replicating something that is safe or standard. It's actually creating design. So we do support this project, and we feel that it should be approved without the conditions, because those previous conditions have
I think your
been
time's
approved
up,
by
Keith.
the commission. No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Sorry, Jen, I missed the timer there.
No, sorry, I was trying not to blast my neighbors with it. Sue is up next. Sue, you're welcome to unmute. We can't hear you yet.
Yes, Sue, if you could unmute.
Should be at the bottom of your screen. There you go.
Yeah, okay. This is a modern take on a Italianate. And we feel that if you change the proportions on these windows, and there is something irritating to me, a bit irritating to me on the facade, if you change that also, you would end up with something dull and ordinary and not interesting. And I feel that the exaggerated windows are there to call your attention to the modernity of the design. And I know how much you fear people always thinking that it might be old construction when it's new. So I think that those windows are perfectly fine and for what it is. Now the porch on the front, as I look at it, is a balance to the doghouse on top. And I like that balance. Now, that might not be the way the porch should be fully dressed or how it's going to be, but I think the size of it is not a problem because it complements that up there on the roof. So I just think that we see things also in the comments that have been approved already by the commission several times. And here we're getting denied for them. So we're trying to, we don't know what to tell people when they've already been approved and now they're not going to be approved or there's a condition. So I would hopefully have you look at this with different eyes than traditional eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. All right, are there any other public comments?
No, but Sue, could you provide your name and your address? We didn't get that.
Sue Glassmacher, 1037 29th Street in Curtis Park.
Thank you, just for the record. Appreciate it. That's it.
Great. All right. If there are no further comments, then Jesse, is there any, or sorry, not Jesse, Becca, is there any recap?
Not for me.
Okay, great. Jesse's the next one. I'm getting you guys mixed up. All right. So let's move into deliberation. What is everybody's thoughts? How do you feel this meets or does not meet the design guidelines? Not all at once, please.
Well, I really appreciate the staff's comment on guideline number 4.4, that the ratio of solid to void on the front facade doesn't match the district pattern. And I think to me, that's actually the biggest problem. And it's mostly in the arched window. Not only is the head too close to the sill of the window above, but also I think the idea of a walkout is something that I don't think that we've ever seen before. And I have to say that I think just changing the proportion of that arched window might solve a lot of issues. And my final comment was, if this was the postmodern, if postmodernism was the, the historic context here, this guy would fit in perfectly, because I think it's a really good example of elements used differently, but they're so completely different that they're not historic anymore.
Thanks, Anne. Other thoughts? How does everyone else feel about the solid to void at the front facade? Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, if I can jump in a little bit, I mean, I'm not terribly concerned, honestly, about the solid to void on the front facade, and the proportions of all of the windows feel like they're giving an appropriate nod to the historic context. I think the major concern for me is really more the side elevations. I totally agree with the staff on those being kind of like oddly wide. And yeah, that's, I guess, in the context of being a completely new infill project and where this is within, a context on that block that, is going to be entirely redeveloped, I don't feel too worried about the proportions.
You don't feel too worried about the proportions on the front?
Sorry, on the front facade.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thanks. Other thoughts on, let's keep talking about windows, since that seems to be a predominant theme or comment. Gary?
Well, I agree with the staff's assessment about the windows on the front facade, and it has to do with the fact, and I think Anne brought it up, that the top of the first story window encroaches on the sills of the second story windows in such a way that it kind of, that's the primary solid to void problem I think that facade has. So if the second story windows, the sills were raised, I think that starts to address that issue. For some reason, and I don't know if the window divisions, that's something we look at in detail, but that's also something that I think becomes, that it's somewhat problematic here, is that since there are no divisions in the windows, there's no subdividing the glassed areas, it almost starts to look like a old building that he took the old windows out and put in a storefront. So I don't think it addresses, I mean, I agree with the neighborhood design association's concerns about exuberance and eccentricity and variety and how that makes Curtis Park. But those things were achieved not by altering the forms or the fenestration patterns, but by adding ornament and detail that was eccentric to those different buildings. And yes, it might have been due to whatever came in on the train or whatever other factors there were, but the basic forms were the Italianate form was not messed with too much. The Victorian form did not get messed with too much. And to add ornament and detail to a building today is expensive. And I understand that that's a limitation. But I think by saying we need more variety, and therefore we're going to take a much looser view of what the basic form and fenestration patterns and massing of these styles is, I think that's a mistake. So generally, I agree with the staff's recommendation on this particular project. I'm not sure about the exterior stair and the ADU. I don't have a problem with the stair itself. I do agree that screen is probably not going to pass muster with the zoning department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Gary. I tend to agree with your comments. I think, either raising the sill of the second floor windows or lowering the head, as Anne had suggested, of the arched window. One of the two, it just feels too, it does feel incompatible with the district as currently presented. And I agree with your comments about how the masses of Italianate were typically not messed with in the district. So I won't repeat that. But I will say, I don't have a problem with the side elevations because, I mean, mainly kind of what Keith had said, they're probably not going to be very visible considering these are tight lots that have very narrow side setbacks between the structures. So I have less heartburn about those windows since I think the visibility will be minimal, especially since the largest windows are not like right in the front, but they're a little bit back from the facade. And those would be the ones that I would be concerned with. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Kelly, I agree. I was thinking the same, with the front corner there being visible and those windows being narrower, that helps me feel like consistency at least is going to be mostly visible from the street. I think the other thing that the staff report mentioned that we haven't talked about yet, and I'm curious, we've talked a lot about kind of the pinch point between the arched lower window and the two windows above. But the staff report also mentions sort of the elongated or heightened parapet, which I know is serving a double function as a guardrail around the roof deck, which of course was something that the typical traditional Italianate didn't have up on the roof. but that, slightly top heavy feel is something that also struck me in reviewing the drawings and again was specifically mentioned in the staff report. And so I'd be curious to hear what other commissioners think about that, knowing that the program of the space and the way it's designed and where floor and ceiling plates are landing is partly driving that. I know that's a, kind of an integral design piece, but also feels like a part of that solid to void ratio that's extremely solid, at the top.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. What did other people think about that proportion at the top of the parapet?
Madam Chair, this is Julie. I agree with Graham. I think that's, he just put the nail on the head. I think that's what's really been bothering me about this the most. Although I am very intrigued with Anne's idea about the size of the arched window, and I think that was bothering me as well. But I think it does feel top heavy, and maybe it's because of the way the doghouse is drawn in to that. It's kind of hard with the drawing to differentiate, exactly where it's going to be. So I appreciate the drawing on the right, but I do feel like it's a little top heavy, and it doesn't feel contiguous with the rest of the facade.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you that it was very hard to read, with the doghouse shown at the same kind of color. But I will say that I don't know. I think they might be able to make it work. I'm curious to see the design detail of like what the parapet actually looks like, and if there were, more space between the windows, the first and second floor windows, maybe that proportionally wouldn't feel so top heavy. I think right now, because of all of the void of the windows below, it just feels really top heavy. But if that were relieved, maybe it wouldn't be. So I don't know. I personally, it's hard for me to say whether that element is proportionally incompatible because of the fenestration as it stays or sits today.
I think that's a fair point too, Kelly. Looking at the other examples included in the application at 3011 Curtis and then 3214 Champa, there's a fairly significant space between the head of the upper window sash and the actual top of cornice. And we just praised another project today for having a simple and subdued cornice in a similar form. But I think that, like you say, some kind of articulation or something there could be maybe just a friendly comment, but something that helps balance without necessarily having to adjust the window component.
And I just want to say, I'm just having a hard time understanding what I'm looking at, because those big, heavy black lines, I don't know whether that is that's actually framing or it's just kind of a simple way of showing it. And to Gary's point, the lack of subdivision in the glass, I'm not sure, again, whether that's a drawing issue or whether really these are all fixed glass pieces. And I'm just going to sort of jump ahead. And to me, this is a project for which I think we should do a denial, because I think there may be actually a really great project here, but I can't see what it is just because of the way it's depicted. And there are so many, I think the elevation that we're seeing on the left is a great example, because I have to say, I thought, the reason I mentioned postmodernism, I thought that was actually a hooked piece on the top until you saw the axometric and realized that it was actually at the back. And even the single column, I can't tell if that's sort of an interesting idea or really kind of wacky. So I'm going to just suggest that we do a denial on this one and ask, not only to fix the proportion of the openings, but to also clarify the drawings a little bit so that we know what it is we're looking at.
So how do others feel about that? Because I just want to gauge whether, there's a consensus to move towards one or another. So we have a motion that goes forward. Julie?
Madam Chair, I would support Anne's idea. I think there's a great project here. I don't think they're very far from a good project that we could approve. It is really hard to see with the way it's drawn. And I think we've given a lot of commentary, hopefully enough commentary that they know, our thoughts. So I would go with Anne's idea of a denial. I hate doing it, but sometimes it's just a lot cleaner that way for the applicant instead of a little conditions.
I'd go either way. People want to move forward, but I will just, offer up that this is a two-part review. So to me, I guess I'm a little less concerned about doing a denial since it will come back to us. So if we have concerns for the fenestration and, clarity we need to see, I think that will come back. To me, I see these as, fairly straightforward. Jen, did you have
I think
you wanted to say?
I just wanted to clarify what the difference between a denial means for the applicant versus a conditional approval, because I think even though this would come back for design details, it sounds like there are many different ways that you all envision the facade changes could occur. And you guys could see it in design detail and say absolutely, or you could say no, not quite, but you kind of be locked into that.
Gotcha.
So
that's fair.
But I think that a denial would give the applicant a lot more flexibility in terms of less prescriptive, because you would need to be pretty prescriptive for conditions on this one.
Thanks, Jen.
Not to say that you guys have to go that route. I'm not trying to push you in one way or another.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
trying
no,
to
no.
explain what the two options
No,
would mean.
you're just catching me in what I said, so I appreciate that. So no, that's a fair point. There are multiple ways that they could address the comments that we had. So, and it sounds like, that's a good suggestion. Can I get some nodding heads if others feel that that's the appropriate route taken? Yeah. Okay. So it seems that we're in consensus. Before we make a motion, I would like us to touch on a couple other items that were brought up that I don't think we've discussed. One is the porch roof. I know, Anne, you brought up the column. Or sorry, Julie, Anne. I'm getting mixed up. Anne, okay. Thank you. But another comment was, that the roof extends about halfway through the width of the home versus a third, which is pretty typical of the district. I don't know if anyone else had, I didn't have concerns with this because it's a very open, it still felt very open to me. I didn't have concerns about that since it's infill, but I don't know if other people felt strongly. Larry doesn't, Julie doesn't, and I saw a face.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing that's funny about this is in one of the earlier applications we had, which was an infill, there was one of the conditions was to make the columns beefier. And then I'm looking at this single one and thinking, okay, well, I don't understand. Maybe it's to add a second one. I think that this gets to this idea that it's a little hard to read what the intent of this is, because on a certain level, it is a very interesting interpretation of a porch to have only one column. And I understand that, and I respect what the neighborhood design review people say. But on the other hand, when we saw previously a porch that had columns that were too thin, we made it a condition to make them thicker. So there's a part of me that thinks to be consistent, we have to say, by the way, in this neighborhood, porches are supported on 2 columns or multiple columns and not just one. So I don't know what anyone else thinks about that.
Okay, and what about the roof, Anne? Did you have a problem with the roof extending half the width versus a third?
Well, I think that the odder part is that it cantilevers past the solid on the right-hand side. Okay. How far out it came, I think it's a drawing issue. I don't know, maybe there's a very wonderful relationship that we're missing in the elevation, that one end, meets up with the corner of the upper window or something. It's a little hard. It's possible there are very wonderful ideas in here, but it's just a little hard to tell why that point was chosen. because we can't, there's nothing to me that shows why it was chosen.
Sure. So any other thoughts on the one column? So the applicant can get some good direction moving forward. Gary?
Well, if we approved one column and the engineer says you need two, does that no longer meet the a mass form and context approval? Those are the kind of things that I think aren't resolved in this presentation. And I agree with what Ann is saying, is there's a concept here, but it appears that there's design rationale behind the concept that's not included in the presentation that makes it hard to understand what are we looking at and what are we approving if we approve this. So I think a denial is probably appropriate. A return submittal can maybe address some of the ambiguities that are presented and that are contained in this particular presentation.
Sure, and I don't disagree. I think we're headed to a denial, as everyone's agreed, but I just want to make sure we're giving adequate feedback and to the applicant about these elements, because at this point we've had one person make a comment about the column. Is that just one person's thought, or does everyone feel that way? Because I don't want the applicant to feel like they have to redesign everything if it's not actually something others feel strongly about. And remember, it's mass form and context. So yes, they'll have to figure out how to structurally make it happen, but I don't want us to just, we don't need the design details of how that works yet. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, so my thought on the porch column, looking at the guidelines, it seems like the concern in the guidelines is that the porch posts and columns are proportioned similarly to the surrounding context, and that they suggest support, so that there's, I think it says, so the porch does not appear to float above the entry. And so I think the provision of one substantial column here achieves that in my mind. And I think it can be, interpreted that way by, reasonably by others. So that's my thought.
Yeah, thank you. I would agree with you. I mean, I think it's, an interesting contemporary interpretation of a porch. And I think, this at least does take those historic elements and kind of update it. And so they did follow the proportions that are typical for a porch, when you're talking about setback from the street and everything like that. So I think that fits within the massing of the district. Okay, and we heard, any other comments on the porch? We've covered openings and fenestration. We've covered the porch. Gary, you had brought up the stair at the ADU. And I just thought I'd throw out there, I didn't have a problem with the fact that there's an exterior stair. It seemed to me in some of the comments, people were, the neighborhood was saying, we've approved other exterior stairs. To me, it's not an issue of having an exterior stair, but maybe the screening of it and just making sure it meets zoning, which it sounds like Becca has recommended they do a zoning review. So that's great. Any other thoughts on that stair?
The only reason I chimed in or I jumped on video is because I wanted to remind you all, if you're aiming for a denial, you should take a look at the guidelines, which guidelines to use.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. And so let's take a look at that right now. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the guidelines that are listed, since they were covering the conditions, which are the same issues that we're taking exception with for the denial, a lot of these will be applicable, but it looks like 4.3 about typical features and rhythms of the district, addressing those window locations and proportions. is a big one, and the scaling elements, which covers the roof discussion we had. 4.4, because of the window proportions. 4.8, because that's another window issue. Lots of guidelines that refer to windows. 4.16 is about the front porch, and we've had that conversation about issues that some commissioners have there. Any other guidelines others think should be included in the motion? Those were the ones I saw based on our conversation.
I think 19 speaks to the screen wall at the stairs. Maybe
Oh, yeah.
clarifying by deliberation that the stairs aren't necessarily the issue, but the screen is a question.
Thank you, Graham.
Madam Chair, should I try a motion?
Go for it, please.
All right. I move to deny application number 2022-COA-159 for the mass form and context at 3012 Champa Street as per design guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.8, 4.16, and 4.19. Character defining features for the Curtis Park Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Julie. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, let's vote. Aaron.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Larry.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Kelly. Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes and the project is denied, but hopefully we gave you adequate feedback. So the next project up for design review is right next door. So 2022-COA-160 at 3022 Champa Street.
All right, so some of this may be a little repetitive, but it bears repeating, I feel like. This pictured here is the rendering of the proposed infill and site location for 3022 Champa Street. The applicant is proposing to construct a single-family residence along the 3000 block of Champa Street across from the Mestizo Curtis Park. The site is currently a vacant lot in the Curtis Park G Historic District. So pictured here is a ground plan comparison. The proposed infill will be set back 20 feet from the street, meeting the typical block setback established for this side of the block. The proposed building is designed to be a modern interpretation of the Queen Anne form and measures 19 feet wide and 62 feet in length. The building will be 30 feet in height with a raised foundation fitting the typical building heights previously approved by the commission for this block. The proposed building does pierce the bulk plane and would need an administrative adjustment. The Landmark Preservation Commission can recommend an administrative adjustment for piercing the bulk plane if it feels that violation of the bulk plane allows the proposed building to better fit the surrounding historic context. The building's roof form is a front-facing gable with no eaves or roof overhang. The lack of a roof overhang is atypical for Queen Anne style Queen Anne forms in Curtis Park. The roof form will feature a dormer and an inset rooftop deck and railing on the side elevation. The proposed dormer is a flat roof engaged dormer with a skylight and picture window. This dormer form is not found in the Curtis Park Historic District. The inset roof deck and railing will be located behind the engaged dormer. While the inset roof deck is unusual, it will be set back substantially from the front wall of the house and will not be readily visible from public vantage points, especially if set behind a more contextual dormer. The infill will have tall, narrow window proportions on the front of the house with rhythms, forms, and heights that are atypical of the Queen Anne style. The front of the building features only arched doors and window openings, floor to ceiling window heights, and no clear window rhythm or alignment, all of which is not seen on Queen Anne style buildings in this district. Staff have concerns about the proposed window surround, brick window surround and banding. However, this is a detail that can be fleshed out during the design detail phase of the project. So historic Queen Anne style buildings in this district feature 1 to 2+ window ratios with sill heights that are several inches above the finished floor. Queen Anne buildings are also often feature a variety of window types, including arches, jack arches, and or ornamental window hoods over rectangular or jack arch windows. When arch windows are used, they are typically articulated as a single large arch window on the first floor near the entrance, and sometimes a smaller arched window or vent in the gable end. In several of the examples included in the application, there is a hierarchy of window sizes between the floor. First floor windows are usually taller, with the second floor windows that are somewhat shorter, and gable end windows that are the smallest windows and usually for a decorative detail. Finally, historic Queen Anne buildings often have a clearly defined window rhythm or symmetrically stacked windows and doors. The current proposal features few ties to the surrounding historic context for windows and doors. And I've included in here several examples of Queen Anne style buildings in this district where you can see the hierarchy of window, either stacked or some type of balanced rhythm across the window and door openings, and when and how arched windows are typically used on these style buildings. In addition to the windows on the front of the house, staff have concerns about the windows on the sides and back of the house. Staff are particularly concerned with the double width windows, the horizontal windows, and the side light style windows on the sides and back of the house. Most of the windows are proposed on the proposed house are floor to ceiling height, which is uncharacteristic again of the Queen Anne style form in this district and leads to unusual window spacings and alignments. Oops. The proposed entrance will be located under the porch, which is typical of the historic district. The proposed door is arched in form and is not supported in the Queen Anne building form in this neighborhood. In the examples provided, in the application packet, all main entry doors are typically paneled half light or 3/4 light doors with a transom. The porch for this house is a 3/4 width porch with a flat roof supported by a single column inset significantly from the edge of the porch roof. Queen Anne style porches for this district typically are full or quarter width porches with gable, hipped, shed, and on occasion flat roof forms. The proposed porch does not fit the context and should be restudied to make it better fit with the other historic Queen Anne style porches. Moving on to the ADU, the applicant is proposing to construct a 2-story garage and ADU at the back of the lot. The ADU will measure 19 feet wide by 23 feet in length and 22 feet 6 inches in height. The ADU will have a simple boxy form with an exterior stair, a flat roof with a parapet, and a garage entrance that faces onto the alley. Staff somewhat have concerns over the height of the windows on this structure, but feel more flexibility could be granted as this is a secondary structure at the back of the lot and it's not readily visible from public vantage points. Staff feel that the proposed exterior stair and screen wall are not appropriate and recommend that the stair be moved to the interior of the structure. So pictured here are 3-dimensional drawings of the proposed building layout, just to give you an idea from floor to floor what it's going to look like. Staff did notice several items in the proposal that may be issues for zoning and recommend that the applicant undergo a zoning only review prior to phase 2 design details review to ensure that they are meeting both landmark and zoning requirements. Staff are particularly concerned with the egress window on the property line, specifically the 13-foot wide light well at the side of the house. Large light wells do not cleanly meet the landmark requirements and likely do not meet zoning code requirements for egress well lengths. Staff also have concerns about the screen wall around the exterior stair for the ADU. The screen wall is right at the property line, which may pose a zoning issue as well. And in addition to the potential zoning violations, staff noticed several drawing inconsistencies and lack of detail that will be needed to be addressed in the final application. Those include missing bulk plane lines in the side and rear elevation, missing roof plan, missing dimensions for the dormer and roof deck, missing lines on the streetscape study that show window and door alignments and heights. Renderings on page 5 of the application packets do not show the dormer accurately, incorrect or missing directions on the elevations, missing north arrow on the site plan. The railing of the roof deck is shown on the rear elevation, but is not shown in the side elevation, and missing interior elevation for the ADU. So pictured here, some renderings of the proposed infill structure. Staff is recommending denial of this application, citing that the proposed window and door styles are atypical, featuring rhythms, forms, and heights not common to the Queen Anne style. Citing guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, and 4.8, that the proposed roof does not feature roof eaves or overhangs, failing to conform with typical roof forms, and the proposed flat roof dormer is atypical and adds complexity to the roof's appearance, citing guideline 4.5 and 4.7. The proposed porch width and column placement does not fit with the surrounding historic context, citing guideline 4.5, 4.15, and 4.16. And finally, that the applicant needs to provide additional dimensions and details in the drawing set and correct all inconsistencies. Staff did want to note that the R&O provided comment on this application, a copy of which is in the application packet for your review. Staff also forwarded on an email of support from the R&O, and that was sent to you by email a few days ago. Finally, I would like to note, there were several comments in the email that that the designs were not necessarily supported or were, I guess to quote the email, ticky-tacky. I did want to mention that many of the previous designs reviewed by the commission for the DHA site were also supported or provided letters of support from the R&O for those designs. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Jessie. Any questions for staff? No? All right. Well, Nick, thank you. Welcome back. You can, for the record, it's the same applicant, so you don't have to repeat all of your information. And the time is yours. You have up to 10 minutes. And you'll just need to unmute.
I'll do what I can. I don't have high hopes after the last one, but this project came from, again, an extensive collaboration with the neighborhood. I trust the neighborhood over staff to give me feedback on what they want and how the neighborhood is supposed to feel and look and function. I was also a resident of the neighborhood, a block from this project. So I have, a library of 5,000 photographs of every single facade of the entire neighborhood. So this is not something that just came out of my head willy-nilly. It is not something that is in any way my ego or any sort of architectural egotistic trip. This is a result of an intense collaboration with the neighborhood. I generated 100+ facades based on context in the neighborhood that were put up to the neighborhood to kind of help figure out how these two houses should act and feel on this corner. This corner, as previously mentioned in the last conversation, is a very important corner. It's a very open and active corner. And all of us really felt that a lot of the the work that needs to be done in this corner is to reinforce the eclectic nature of the neighborhood. As mentioned in the submittal, there is a grid pattern that tends to happen on gabled houses in this neighborhood. What I have done is taken that grid and interpreted it differently. I hope that the commission can understand that there needs to be room for expression and needs to be room for context in this process, and that there is no existing context on this lot. So we felt that we had some really great opportunity to throw a little fun and a little exuberance and a little eclecticism back into this neighborhood. We really wanted to express that by using contextual material, contextual window shapes, contextual building form. The dormer is not uncommon in Curtis Park. I'm using it in a different way, but it's definitely not uncommon. The porch is definitely a different interpretation of a porch, but as previously mentioned in the previous application, the guideline is to show that it is supported, and the use of a single column is to really play on the difference of that interpretation. The arched windows are very, very common characteristic in Curtis Park. And frankly, I think that they are underutilized in landmark submittals. They're incredibly common. As far as brick detailing comments, I'm excited to further collaborate with the neighborhood on brick detailing, as I think that that is an integral part of this process, especially in this neighborhood. Happy to hear comments, I guess.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? I have one, and it's one that I was thinking we probably should have asked in the last round as well, so it'd be a good opportunity now. So in looking at the elevations, the windows seem to have some pretty heavy black line weights around them. Do you see that as being a thicker frame, or just, you know, some sort of decorative brick mold around? I know you're not into design details yet, just wondering.
So they will be a traditional style window in that they have a respective jamb, mullion, all of that sort of configuration. I do want to heavily detail these with brick corbelling and sill details, and that's kind of what these arches and what these are expressed as. Obviously, as you said, that's a part 2 discussion should we get there. These are definitely not meant to be big flat faces. I want to really spend time detailing and articulating these openings, especially in collaboration with the neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? No? All right, thank you for your time. And I'm guessing we have some more public comments?
Yep.
Great.
Keith, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Hi, Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, Curtis Park Design Review Chair. Like Nick said, we did over 100 iterations of what this had the possibility, and we were really looking at doing something that reflected Curtis Park, and we think Nick hit this right on the nail. It's an amazing design. It hits all of the design guidelines. It's simplified as a design guidelines. It's reflective of its time, and it draws in very great elements of what makes Curtis Park, and that is a vernacular neighborhood with some standout architecture. And so there is a hierarchy to these windows. And in my letter, I detailed out exactly how the design guidelines were met by this design. And we're really quite honestly confused as to what the direction that we're supposed to give applicants when you approve an ultra-modern vertical siding addition on a Italianate, and then you approve really safe, mundane Queen Anne's, we don't know where to tell applicants where to land. We really feel like there's a lack of consistency, and that is really hard for us when we know that these all meet design guidelines to some extent, and you clearly have latitude to interpret those guidelines, yet you do so not in a consistent pattern in which we understand and know how best to advise people who would like to be a part of Curtis Park. And so we feel that this design hits all of the design guidelines. We really feel like the windows are appropriate. The side windows are appropriate. The ADU is appropriate. These are narrow lots. There are a lot of things that this commission has previously approved in this design that is
Thank you, Keith.
deserving. And so
That's
again,
the
we
end of your
approve
time.
this, and we want to have you give this one
Thank you.
an approval as well.
All right, next comment.
Oops, hit the wrong button. Sue, go ahead and unmute when you're ready. Yep.
Hi, Sue Glassmacher, 1037 29th Street. Once again, we're not trying to recreate a traditional look. We like this house because it is different. And we saw that pattern emerging on the others, that they use the same formula, and they check the boxes. They're boring and dull and missed opportunities. But this one is trying to bring some interest in. And it's not a Queen Anne. It's an echo of a Queen Anne. It's not supposed to be symmetric. It's balanced. And it's supposed to show off an element that we see all over the neighborhood. And it just shows it off, the rounded windows. And so I don't have a problem. I really like this design. I think it's interesting, and it's an echo, and I think it fits in. Again, we're getting dinged on things that have been proved before, that have been approved. So it's hard for us to figure things out. They might be, I would like to see, after the last one was the easy one, we thought, and this one, you're probably going to have pretty much the same problems with it. And, but please be specific in your comments. We like this. It's so fresh. God, it would be, it's different. It's on the park. It will be visible. And so that's just where I'm going with it. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other public comments?
Sorry, not muted. No, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, great. Is there any recap?
I was just going to say, I wanted to address a couple of things. So the RNO asks, where guidance could be gathered. We do invite the RNOs to reach out to staff directly if they have questions, or if they'd like to know more behind our reasoning for certain things. We do meet as a 9-member or 10-member staff now to review all projects and to discuss the merits and how they meet the guidelines and past decisions. So we invite the RNO to reach out to us if they have questions about where our motions or recommendations are coming from. I also felt that it was important to note that if the applicant does have additional detail, and we've encouraged this from the beginning, if the applicant does have additional detail photos of context that would support different design elements, we would be more than happy to have that included in the application. It makes it easier for us to review it so that we can see where different elements are being drawn from. So we do invite the applicant to include those additional images in there to support their design. And at this point, staff made the recommendation of denial. Basically, because yes, some things could be approved if it was just like one or two things that were atypical, but we felt in this case there were so many things that stacked up that were atypical that we could not recommend approval, and they did not cleanly meet the guidelines or clearly fit in with the surrounding historic context. We do encourage modern design for our new infill projects, but we also want those designs to be contextual.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate you addressing those concerns from the RNO and the applicant. And the applicant always has pre-application meetings available as well. So if you're trying to get a read on where staff feel you know, a design meets or does not meet guidelines, you can always do that. I'd also like to address the applicant, you know, mention that this wasn't an ego thing or an architectural like statement he was trying to make. And I really appreciate that you live in the neighborhood, you know, the neighborhood. I don't doubt that. I see where some of these are coming from. So just know that we're not trying to do this as, you know, make assumptions about you as a person. It's not personal. It's we're just trying to look at it against the design guidelines, since that's what we're required to do in our position. So hopefully you can appreciate that, and we'll try and give you as much feedback as we can to make things as helpful as possible. So I know you're frustrated, so apologies for that, but let's go ahead and move forward into deliberation on this one. So, you know, same applicant, same block, but totally different design. What does everybody think?
Hey, Kelly, I'd like to jump in and maybe start by just revisiting guideline 4.8 here.
Right.
I think that speaks to both the public comment, to the conversation about windows, you know, but 4.8 says to design windows and doors and other features to be compatible with an original primary structure or historic district. It further down talks about new infill also, but, you know, I think specifically A, B, and C of this guideline mention incorporating windows and doors at a ratio similar to those found on nearby structures, new construction with public visibility to incorporate doors and windows with similar proportions. We talked a lot about the arch top, which I think we all agree is a common Victorian feature. But I think that B and C really speak to some of the concerns that we talked about on the previous project, and I feel apply here as staff does as well. And B says using contemporary window patterns and designs ensure they respect the character and proportions of windows in the surrounding historic context. And the comment was made that this lot doesn't have an immediate context, but I would say that the context is the Curtis Park district, which extends beyond just the lot. And C continues to say that maintaining a typical historic placement of headers and sills relative to cornices and belt courses, I think also speaks to our conversation about spacing between floor plates on the previous project and, you know, a similar condition as presented here. So, you know, echoing your comment that we're doing our best to apply guidelines that are encompassing of many different, you know, parts of the city and many different historic properties here. But, you know, I think more than anything, the shape, the dormer, the form of this is all so close, like we said on the last one again. But specifically, guideline 4.8 is where I find the pause here.
Well said, Graham. I see a lot of nodding heads, so I feel many commissioners feel the same way. Other thoughts about this one? I know it's been a long day, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So somebody else. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know what the other commissioners feel about the lack of roof overhangs, eave detail.
Gary?
I agree that that in order to be somewhat respectful of the Queen Anne style that this is being responsive to, it needs to pay more attention to those things that make a Queen Anne a Queen Anne. So the lack of roof overhangs and edge detail, I think, is an issue because of that. I mean, I've seen contemporary design of buildings like this with no roof edge, no overhangs of that sort, and that may be appropriate for contemporary design. Does raise a bunch of issues in terms of overall durability of the building. Overhangs work, and that's why Queen Anne buildings have lasted 100 years. They didn't have overhangs in the beginning. They wouldn't exist today. So there was a reason for that, and that sometimes gets lost in architectural styles. They do evolve as a response, not just to stylistic preferences, but also how the exterior materials of a building function for its own self-preservation. And that's why the detailing gets important.
Other thoughts on the roof? I mean, Larry, you brought up the comment. Did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally agree with the staff comment that the lack of roof overhang makes it not, feel, as Gary said, necessarily respectful of the idea of the Queen Anne. And in combination, I think, with the other components that were brought up, I don't want to necessarily rule out that I would be able to approve something that didn't have a roof overhang, but I think in combination with all the other factors, that's my feeling about it.
Madam Chair, this is Julie. Staff brought this up and I wanted to see what other commissioners thought about the dormer. I mean, it is not, I mean, obviously this is new construction. But the dormer is, with that flat roof and the flat, the flatness of it, it just doesn't, it doesn't work for me. It might work for other commissioners. I just was curious to see if they all thought it met guidelines.
Thoughts on the dormer?
I'll jump in there. I think, that is one place that comments that we've heard today about allowing for some distinction of new construction and some playfulness in design. And, I know we've got different setbacks for rooftop dog houses and third stories and things like that. I think that, as was noted in the email that Keith mentioned as well, maybe bringing that dormer down a little bit as it would have been in a traditional dormer, potentially added, sometime later if this was a historic building. I think that is something that could be, tweaked a little bit and still work well. It is unique not to see kind of a side gable or, but if it were a shed, so I do understand, Julie, where, visually it's a little bit different, but I think that potentially could be emphasized with a little more success and still meet the guidelines as a creative component here without getting into any design suggestions. So I don't disagree, but I feel like that feels closer to me than some of the other components we've talked about.
I take the thumbs up as Julie agrees. I agree with you too, Graham, but yeah, I think maybe if it didn't join at the ridge line of the roof, it would feel a little bit more in scale. But I personally didn't have an issue with the fact that, typically we approve dormers that are not in wall dormers, but set back from the wall. And since this is completely new construction and we're not trying to preserve an original roof line, I didn't have any concerns with that personally, because I feel like that's typically why that guideline exists, is to preserve what that original roof line is. So just throwing that out there. Obviously to shed water, it can't be completely flat. So it's got to be a shed in some to some degree. So I don't personally feel it has to be a gable. I think, it is setback and it is articulated as a dormer. It just, if it were scaled a little bit smaller, it would be more proportional, I think. Gary?
And I'm agreeing with what's been said about the dormer. The detailing of that dormer is going to be challenging because of the renderings we're looking at here kind of imply it's got the same exterior material as the rest of the envelope, and it won't be brick because by code you can't support brick on wood frame. And so if it is going to be brick, it's going to be structurally different. So I just a heads up that the detailing of that dormer is going to be challenging. So the form of the dormer, I think, needs to be well thought out as to how the detailing might occur so that it can be detailed to be not only consistent with the guidelines, but also good design.
I'd like to revisit the roof overhang again, because I don't think we heard from everyone, and I'm not saying we have to hear from absolutely every person, if everyone feels in agreement, but Larry, you had kind of expressed that, for the most part, you agree that it feels, taking inspiration from a Queen Anne, that having an overhanging eaves or of some sort would be appropriate, but that you weren't saying, I believe, I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you had mentioned that maybe on its own, like if that were one thing, maybe they could make it work, but it's the accumulation of different guidelines that they're not meeting that is making it difficult. Is that right? And the reason I ask is because I kind of feel the same way. Like there are situations where I kind of feel, because I was looking back at the guidelines, and the guideline specifically talking about roof form doesn't say anything about eaves necessarily. I know it's kind of all over encompassing lots of different roof forms, so it's difficult, but it says, a roof form that's compatible with the historic context, use a roof form that's consistent with typical roof forms of existing structures in the district in terms of pitch, orientation, and complexity. And so I think this does hit those marks in my mind, that, complexity, pitch, and orientation all seem to be very matching of what's found in the district. So I think it's, I could be swayed that is, a modern interpretation that's appropriate. I don't think we need to replicate a Queen Anne, as the comments we heard from the applicant and the Arno were saying, this is not intended to be a Queen Anne. It's taking characteristics to be compatible with, and I agree with that thought. So I just wanted to mention that I know I'm just one commissioner, but if some of these other issues were resolved that have been outlined in the staff brief, then maybe there's a way that could work. I don't know.
Yes, you've correctly interpreted what I was saying, and yeah, I could approve it if some of the other issues were addressed.
Thanks. I only wanted to revisit it because I was actually surprised. I thought we did have a guideline in there about eaves. Looking back, I didn't see one.
I suppose it's a question of when the guideline says complexity, does complexity involve like the eave detailing? I don't know how exactly to interpret that.
Gary, yeah.
Well, I guess I wonder, is a roof overhang part of roof form or not? I would tend to agree that a roof, it's not just whether it's gable or gambrel or hip. The form is also how does the roof plane meet the wall, and I'm not saying that the proposed design has no roof form. Because it does. I'm saying that from my perspective, the roof form presented is not consistent with a Queen Anne roof form because of the lack of an overhang. Now, it's not to say how it would be detailed around the edges. and I know that probably didn't clarify anything, but for me, roof form includes whether or not it has an overhang.
I agree with you. I guess my thought is this isn't just a Queen Anne. That's where I'm struggling, but I can't recall in my time on the commission a primary structure where we've approved a roof, a gable roof without an overhang. And I see Jessie shaking her head no. I seem to recall we might have approved a secondary structure, like a garage, specifically, I think in Baker. I don't remember the address, but anyway, so that's why I was starting to think of question it. I was like trying to remember back. Have we ever done this before? You know, so. Okay, let's get back into it. So we've talked about the roof, we've talked about the dormer, we've talked about the fenestration. Graham, you brought up that guideline, and I think we all kind of shook our heads in agreement there. Is there anything else? I believe our porch comments are probably very similar to the other one. Anything else on the porch we'd like to provide direction on for the applicant? I think we all feel, shake your head yes if you feel like we covered that substantially in the last one. Okay. And the ADU, very similar to the last one. So I think we're good there unless anybody has something to add. Okay. Any other concerns that we haven't discussed?
I'd like to just mention the gable end. And I think in a way, the gable end is the same issue as the roof overhang, which is to say that there is an approach to volume like this, which is it's just a volume that could be anything. It could be made out of stucco, it could be made out of siding, it could be made out of anything, and the entire, all four sides of it and almost the roof are just all one. They're extruded. I think the word used to be extruded. It was an extruded thing. And that is actually a very valid way of going. But if you do that, as Gary says, there are a lot of detail issues. And it's unclear to me whether, and I know because we're just doing mass form and context, it's unclear to me if that extruded look of just something that just came out as one piece is what the applicant is going for, or whether it's sort of a drawing issue or a presentation issue that they have not gotten yet to the level of being able to be a little bit, to differentiate a little bit. Because I look at the top of that arch and there's some line of detailing that goes around it, and I'm not quite sure what that is. And in a Queen Anne, it would usually be maybe a differentiation of material. So it's, in a funny way, I think if you really want to make this extruded, get rid of that line. And this is just all one thing. And that's a very, very valid way of going. But it does have some pretty challenging detailing that goes along with it. So that's just a friendly comment to the, that may be a great idea, by the way. I just not quite sure if that's what we're looking at.
Thanks, Anne. All right, would someone like to make a motion? Bueller. Come on.
Madam Chair, I move to deny application number 2022-COA-060 for the new infill building at 3022 Champa Street as per design guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.7, 4.8, 4.15, 4.16, character defining features for the Curtis Park Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Graham.
Just
All
one
right.
quick thing. There needs to be amendment. The number was typed in incorrectly in the
motion, so it's should be COA 160, not 060.
Oh, gotcha. Would someone make a friendly amendment? I'll make a friendly amendment that in the motion, the application number be revised to 2022-COA-160. Do you
Accept
accept?
that.
Great. And Graham?
Yep, accept.
Okay. All right. If there's no further discussion on the motion, then I'll call for the vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Graham?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Anne?
Aye.
Kelly? Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes, so the project is denied, but please don't be discouraged. I hope that our feedback was helpful. Definitely you have some great ideas, and I think with some tweaks, we'll hopefully see you back soon. I believe there were no business or discussion items. Is that correct, Jennifer? Jennifer, I never call you Jennifer, but it's in your name right there. I was just reading your name off.
Just two quick things I wanted to give you guys a heads up about. So one is that May is Preservation Month, which is the most exciting month of the year, we all know. And we have a heavier than usual Instagram focus this month. And so please check out our Instagram account. But we also are having 3 webinars about architectural history in Denver, architectural styles in Denver. And so Abby and Evan are hosting those. They are Thursday, the 5th, the 19th, and the 26th. They are all at noon. And please feel free to join those webinars. We will be recording them, so they'll be on our website. But that'll be fun for everyone. You know, Abby always does the 150 years of architectural history in Denver in 50 minutes. And so this way it's in 3 webinars. So, and then the second thing is that the design guideline phase 1 guidelines are up. I emailed you guys last week, but the draft is up for public comment. That public comment is expires at the end of May, so May 31st it will close. And we encourage you all, and we encourage the public to provide as much comment as possible on those guidelines. Yep, Gary.
I have a question. Is the only format for receiving comments using the software that's embedded in the website?
Typically, yes. But if you have comments that you want to provide us that are like marked up somehow otherwise, you can email them to us.
Okay.
I would encourage you to email them to landmark@denvergov.org, not to me personally or to another staff member, just so we can keep track of them. But the best way for us to keep track of it and to make sure we have actually captured your comments or addressed your comments are going to be through the website.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. We're using the same tool that our colleagues in planning services use to provide comment or ask for public comments on our plans. So it's something that we've not used before, but we collectively in CPE have used quite a bit.
Great. All right. Well, if that's everything, thanks. I know it was a long meeting. But thank you all. Have a good night. I'll close the meeting formally.